A single father finds a billionaire buried alive in the forest, but what she whispers in those first desperate moments will unravel a conspiracy that reaches into the highest corridors of power. This is the story of Noah Briggs, a man who thought he was just teaching his son about survival, only to discover that some rescues demand everything you have. Stay with me until the end, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels across the world. The mist came early that September morning, rolling through the pines like something alive, something that knew secrets the daylight would never tell. Noah Briggs had seen 1,000 mornings like this one, had watched the sun burn through the fog while he made his rounds through Blackwood State Forest, checking trails, marking hazards, doing the quiet work that kept hikers safe and the wilderness wild. But this morning was different. This morning, his son was with him. "Dad, why do we have to be up so early?" Ethan mumbled, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his too-big jacket, a hand-me-down from Noah's own teenage years. At 12, the boy was all knees and elbows, growing faster than Noah could afford to keep him in clothes that fit. His dark hair stuck up in the back where he'd slept on it wrong, and there were still pillow creases on his cheek. "Because the best time to see the forest is when it's waking up," Noah said, adjusting the pack on his shoulders. "And because you go out one more week before school starts, and I'll be damned if you spend it playing video games in your room." Ethan made a face but didn't argue. That was one of the things Noah appreciated about his son. The kid might grumble, but he showed up. He always showed up. Ever since Emily died 3 years ago, it had been just the two of them, and they'd learned to be enough for each other. The trail was narrow here, barely more than a deer path winding between old-growth trees that had stood since before Noah's grandfather walked these woods. The morning light filtered through the canopy and dusty shafts, illuminating spiderwebs strung between branches like nature's own stained glass. Noah pointed them out to Ethan, showing him how you could read the forest if you paid attention, where the deer had bedded down, where a bear had marked its territory on a tree trunk, where the soil told stories of water and wind and time. "See that?" Noah crouched beside a patch of disturbed earth, his practiced eye cataloging the details. Boot prints, recent, maybe a day old, size 11 or 12, deep treads. "Someone's been through here off trail." "Is that bad?" Ethan knelt beside him, interested now. "Not necessarily. Could be hikers who got lost. Could be hunters scouting for deer season." Noah frowned, studying the prints. They led deeper into the forest, away from the marked paths, into an area that was technically restricted. "But they shouldn't be out here. This is protected land." They followed the prints for a while, Noah's ranger instincts pulling him forward, even as a part of him wondered if he should just radio it in and let someone else handle it. But that wasn't his nature. He'd spent 4 years in the Army as a combat medic and another 8 as a ranger in these woods. When something was wrong, he fixed it. When someone needed help, he helped. It was that simple. The prints led them to a small clearing, maybe 30 feet across, ringed by massive oaks that had to be 200 years old. The ground here was different, recently disturbed, leaves pushed aside, dirt that looked too loose, too fresh. Noah's stomach tightened. Something wasn't right. "Dad." Ethan's voice was small, uncertain. "Do you hear that?" Noah went still, holding up a hand for silence. At first he heard nothing but the morning sounds of the forest, birds calling, branches creaking, the distant chatter of a squirrel. Then he heard it. Faint. So faint he almost missed it. A sound that didn't belong. A voice, muffled, desperate. "Help!" The word was barely audible, more breath than sound, but it shot through Noah like electricity. He was moving before he could think, dropping to his knees at the edge of the disturbed earth, pressing his ear to the ground. "Hello?" he called out. "Can you hear me?" The response was immediate, a surge of frantic sounds from beneath the soil, gasping, crying, words he couldn't make out but didn't need to. Someone was buried here. Someone was alive down there. "Ethan, my pack, now!" Noah's training kicked in, his voice steady and commanding even as his heart hammered against his ribs. He started digging with his hands, scooping away loose dirt and leaves, his fingers hitting something solid just inches down. A board. No, plywood. Someone had built a box. Ethan dropped the pack beside him, his face white. "Dad, what?" Call 911. Tell them we need an ambulance at the Old Oak Clearing, North Sector, 2 miles in from the ranger station. Go! But even as Ethan fumbled for the satellite phone, cell service was worthless out here, Noah was calculating. 2 miles. Rough terrain. Even if they sent a team immediately, it would be 20 minutes, maybe 30. He looked at the makeshift grave, heard the weakening sounds from below, and knew with absolute certainty that whoever was down there didn't have 30 minutes. He grabbed his camping axe from the pack and started chopping at the plywood, each blow measured and precise. Too much force, and he could hit whoever was underneath. Not enough, and they'd suffocate while he worked. The wood was cheap, thin, meant to keep someone contained rather than protected. It splintered under the axe, and he tore the pieces away with his hands, ignoring the splinters that dug into his palms. Dirt poured through the opening, and he realized with horror that the box was filling, that whoever was inside was being slowly suffocated by the very earth meant to hide them. He dug faster, wider, making the hole large enough to reach through. "I'm coming!" he shouted down. "Hold on!" His hand plunged into the dirt, feeling blindly, desperately, until his fingers brushed something warm. Skin. A hand. He grabbed it, felt fingers clutch at his with terrifying strength, and pulled. She came up like a drowning victim breaking the surface, gasping and choking, dirt streaming from her hair and clothes. Noah caught her under the arms and hauled her out of the makeshift grave, cradling her against his chest as she coughed and retched, expelling dirt and spit in sheer terror. "I've got you," he said, the same words he'd said to wounded soldiers in Afghanistan, to lost hikers, to his son when Emily died. "I've got you. You're safe now." She was small in his arms, couldn't have weighed more than 120 pounds, wearing what had once been expensive clothes, now ruined with dirt and blood. Her face was bruised, one eye swollen nearly shut, and there were ligature marks on her wrists where zip ties had cut into the skin. Dark hair clung to her face in mud-streaked tangles, and when she opened her eyes, one blue, one too swollen to see, she looked at him with an expression of such raw, desperate hope that it nearly broke his heart. "Please," she whispered, her voice hoarse and cracking. "Please don't call anyone yet." Noah stared at her, momentarily thrown. "Ma'am, you need a hospital. You need—" "They'll find me!" Her hand shot out, grabbing his jacket with surprising strength. "If you call the police, they'll find me. Please, please, I'm begging you." She was in shock, Noah told himself. Trauma did strange things to people's minds, made them paranoid, made them say things that didn't make sense. But there was something in her eyes, something beyond the fear and pain that gave him pause. A clarity. An intelligence that cut through the terror. Ethan appeared at his elbow, the satellite phone in his hand. "They're sending someone, but... Dad, who is that?" "I don't know yet." Noah looked down at the woman in his arms, at the grave they'd pulled her from, at the plywood, and the fresh boot prints leading away through the trees. Someone had done this. Someone had beaten her, tied her up, buried her alive, and walked away. "But we're going to find out." "No hospitals," she said again, her grip on his jacket tightening. "No police." "Not yet." "Please, I need time to think." Every instinct Noah had screamed at him to ignore her, to wait for the ambulance, to let the professionals handle this. But he'd learned long ago to trust his gut, and his gut was telling him that this woman wasn't crazy. She was scared. And maybe, just maybe, she was right. "Ethan, call them back. Tell them false alarm, we found what made the noise. Spooked deer or something. Apologize for wasting their time." "Dad, do it!" Noah's voice left no room for argument. He stood, lifting the woman with him, surprised by how light she was. "We're taking her to the cabin." The walk back was the longest 2 miles of Noah's life. The woman, he still didn't know her name, drifted in and out of consciousness, mumbling things he couldn't quite catch. Ethan walked ahead, looking back every few minutes with questions written all over his face, questions Noah didn't have answers to. The cabin wasn't much, a 2-bedroom ranger station that Noah had called home for the past 5 years, nestled in a clearing with a view of the valley below. It had running water from a well, solar panels on the roof, and enough isolation that the nearest neighbor was 3 miles away. Right now, that isolation felt like both a blessing and a curse. Noah kicked the door open and carried the woman inside, laying her carefully on the couch. She was shivering despite the warmth of the morning, her body going into shock. He'd seen it before, knew what to do. His medical kit was in the closet, well-stocked and organized with the efficiency of a man who'd once been responsible for keeping soldiers alive in the desert. Ethan, warm water, clean towels, and the first aid kit from my room. Move. His son obeyed without question, and Noah was grateful. They'd been through enough together that Ethan knew when to ask questions and when to just trust his father. This was definitely a trust moment. Noah started his assessment the way he'd been trained, ABCs: airway, breathing, circulation. She was breathing, albeit shallowly. Her pulse was rapid but strong. No obvious signs of internal bleeding, but the bruising on her face and arms suggested she'd been beaten thoroughly. The ligature marks on her wrists were infected, probably a day or two old. There were cuts on her hands, defensive wounds, and what looked like a bullet graze on her left shoulder. Someone had tried very hard to kill this woman. "Who are you?" he asked softly, cleaning the dirt from her face with a warm cloth. "What happened to you?" Her eyes fluttered open, focusing on him with effort. "My name," she whispered, "is Madeline Cross." Noah's hands froze. Madeline Cross. The name detonated in his mind like a flashbang grenade. He'd seen her face on the news, on the front page of every newspaper, on missing person posters in town. Madeline Cross, tech billionaire, founder of Cross Technologies, one of the most successful software companies in the world. She'd disappeared 2 weeks ago, vanished from her San Francisco penthouse without a trace. The FBI was involved. There was a $5 million reward for information leading to her recovery, and she was lying on his couch, covered in dirt and blood, begging him not to call the police. "Jesus Christ," he breathed. "Not quite." A ghost of a smile crossed her battered face. "Though I suppose I'm supposed to be dead, so maybe close enough." Ethan appeared with the supplies, his eyes widening as he got his first clear look at their guest. "Dad, is that, Ethan, I need you to do something for me." Noah took the supplies, keeping his voice calm. "I need you to go to your room, put on your headphones, and play that game you like. The loud one. Don't come out until I tell you to. But, please, son, trust me." Ethan looked between his father and the woman, and Noah saw the moment his son made the connection, saw recognition flash across his face. But Ethan was a good kid. He nodded and disappeared down the hall, closing his door behind him. Noah turned back to Madeline Cross. "You want to tell me why one of the richest women in America is buried in my forest?" "Because someone very powerful wants me dead," she said, and they almost succeeded. Over the next hour, as Noah cleaned her wounds and bandaged her injuries, Madeline told him the story. Her voice was hoarse from screaming in that makeshift grave, but she pushed through, needing him to understand. She'd built Cross Technologies from nothing, she said. A scholarship kid from Detroit who'd taught herself to code, who'd seen a gap in cybersecurity and filled it with software that now protected half the Fortune 500. She'd made billions. She'd changed the world. And she'd made enemies. "My business partner, Richard Vance," she said, wincing as Noah cleaned the bullet graze on her shoulder. "We started the company together 15 years ago, 50-50 split. But over the years, we grew apart. He wanted to take the company in directions I couldn't support, selling user data, working with foreign governments, cutting corners on security. We fought about it constantly." "So he killed you?" Noah asked, applying antibiotic ointment. "Tried to." She laughed bitterly. 3 nights ago, he invited me to his estate to discuss a new product launch. I should have known better. When I arrived, there were 2 men waiting, not security, contractors. The kind you hire when you want someone to disappear. Noah's jaw tightened. "They beat you." "They did more than that. They wanted access codes, passwords, details about our security protocols. They wanted me to sign over my shares of the company, and when I wouldn't..." She trailed off, her hand touching her swollen eye. "They got creative." "How did you end up buried in Blackwood Forest?" "That was Richard's masterstroke. If I'd just disappeared, the FBI would never stop looking. But if they found evidence that I'd gone hiking, gotten lost, had an accident... People die in the wilderness all the time, don't they, Ranger?" Noah nodded slowly, understanding. So they brought you here, buried you alive, made it look like you'd gone on a hike and never came back. They drove me out here in the trunk of a car. I was barely conscious. I remember them digging, remember the sound of the dirt hitting the plywood. And I remember Richard's voice, right before they sealed me in. He said, "Nothing personal, Maddie, just business." Her voice broke on the last word, and Noah saw tears cut tracks through the dirt on her face. Without thinking, he reached out and took her hand, the same gesture he'd offered to countless wounded soldiers. To his wife as she lay dying in a hospital bed, to his son when the nightmares came. "You're safe now," he said. "No." She shook her head violently. "You don't understand. Richard has connections everywhere. Police, judges, politicians. Half the town council owns stock in Cross Technologies. If word gets out that I'm alive, that I'm here, he'll send people to finish the job." "Then what do you want me to do?" Noah asked. "I can't just keep you hidden here forever." "I don't need forever. I just need time to think, to plan, to figure out who I can trust." She looked up at him, and in her eyes Noah saw something he recognized, the determination of someone who'd survived the unsurvivable and was ready to fight back. "Can you give me that? A day? Maybe 2? Noah should have said no. Should have called the FBI, handed her over to people who actually knew how to handle billion-dollar conspiracies and attempted murders. But he looked at this woman, at the ligature marks on her wrists and the bruises blooming purple and yellow on her skin, and he thought about Emily. About how she'd looked at him in those final days, asking him to save her when he couldn't, begging him to do something, anything, to make the cancer stop eating her alive. He hadn't been able to save his wife, but maybe he could save Madeline Cross. 48 hours, he said. Then we do this my way with people I trust. Relief flooded her face. Thank you. Thank you so much. Don't thank me yet. Noah stood, gathering the bloody towels and used bandages. You need rest, food, and probably a dozen other things I can't give you. My medical training only goes so far. I've had worse, she said, which Noah very much doubted but didn't contradict. Right now, I just need to sleep somewhere that isn't a coffin. He helped her to his room. Ethan could bunk with him for a few nights, and she was asleep before her head hit the pillow. Noah stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her breathe, making sure she actually was breathing, that this wasn't all some elaborate hallucination brought on by bad coffee and too many early mornings. But no, she was real. Madeline Cross was real, and she was sleeping in his bed, and somewhere out there, powerful people who wanted her dead thought they'd succeeded. Noah closed the door softly and found Ethan in the kitchen, his headphones around his neck, making sandwiches with the focused intensity of someone trying very hard not to think about the billionaire sleeping 20 feet away. So, Ethan said, not looking up from his sandwich construction, that's Madeline Cross. Yeah, the one from the news, the missing billionaire. Yeah, and we're not calling the police because, Noah sat down heavily at the kitchen table, suddenly exhausted. Because she asked us not to, and because I believe her when she says someone powerful tried to kill her. Ethan finally looked up, his young face serious. Are we in danger? It was the question Noah had been asking himself since they pulled Madeline from the ground. The honest answer was yes, probably, almost certainly. But he looked at his son, this brave, smart, good kid who'd already lost so much, and knew he couldn't put that weight on him. I won't let anything happen to you, Noah said, which wasn't really an answer but was the only truth that mattered. I promise. Ethan nodded, accepting this, trusting his father the way he'd always trusted him. Okay, so what do? We keep her safe for 2 days. We don't tell anyone she's here, and we figure out how to help her without getting ourselves killed in the process. Sounds easy, Ethan said dryly, a flash of humor that reminded Noah so much of Emily it hurt. Then more seriously, I'm glad you found her, Dad. I'm glad she's not dead. Me too, kid. Me too. That night, after Ethan had gone to bed and the cabin was dark and quiet, Noah sat on the porch with his rifle across his knees. It was an old habit from his army days, from deployments where the night was never truly safe. He told himself he was being paranoid, that no one could possibly know Madeline was here, that they had time. But he couldn't shake the feeling that the forest was watching him, that somewhere in the darkness, something was waiting. And when a twig snapped in the tree line, he was on his feet in an instant, rifle raised, every nerve screaming danger. It was just a deer, spooked by his sudden movement, bounding away into the night. But Noah didn't lower the rifle. Not yet. Because Madeline Cross was right. Someone had tried to kill her, and they thought they'd succeeded. But soon, maybe tomorrow, maybe the next day, they'd want to confirm their work. They'd come back to make sure the body was still buried, that no one had found her. And when they did, Noah Briggs would be waiting. He'd failed to save Emily. He'd held her hand as the cancer took her piece by piece, powerless to stop it, useless in the face of cellular betrayal. But this was different. This was a threat he could see, an enemy he could fight. This was something he could actually do. The mist rolled in again as midnight approached, turning the familiar forest strange and otherworldly. Noah stayed on the porch, watching, waiting, protecting. Inside, Madeline Cross slept the sleep of the rescued, unaware that her nightmare had only just begun. Because tomorrow, when Richard Vance learned that his carefully planned murder had failed, when he realized that the woman he'd buried alive was still breathing, still dangerous, still capable of destroying everything he'd built on her grave, tomorrow, the real war would begin. And Noah Briggs, single father and small-town ranger, was about to find himself at the center of a battle he never asked for but couldn't walk away from. The forest kept its secrets, but not forever. Never forever. Dawn broke cold and gray, the kind of morning that felt more like an ending than a beginning. Noah hadn't slept, had spent the entire night on that porch with his rifle and his thoughts, watching the tree line for movement that never came. By the time the first light touched the valley below, his eyes burned with exhaustion, and his mind churned with questions he couldn't answer. Inside, he found Ethan already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with his math homework spread out in front of him, pretending that everything was normal. The kid had always been good at that, at finding small islands of routine in the middle of chaos. After Emily died, he'd done the same thing, burying himself in schoolwork and video games, anything to avoid the gaping hole their lives had become. "She awake yet?" Ethan asked without looking up from his equations. "Haven't checked. Figured she needs the rest." "Dad, what are we actually going to do? Like, really do?" Ethan's pencil stilled on the paper. "Because hiding a missing billionaire in our cabin seems like the kind of thing that could go really wrong, really fast." Noah poured himself coffee, the pot he'd made at 3 a.m, now thick and bitter. "I'm working on it." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got right now." Before Ethan could respond, a sound came from Noah's bedroom, a crash, followed by a muffled cry. Noah was moving before he could think, crossing the cabin in 3 long strides, the instincts that had kept him alive in combat firing on all cylinders. He threw open the door to find Madeline on the floor beside the bed, tangled in the sheets, her face twisted in pain. I'm sorry," she gasped, trying to push herself up with arms that shook with effort. "I just needed to use the bathroom, but my legs—" "Don't apologize." Noah knelt beside her, slipping an arm around her waist. "Your body's been through hell. It's going to take time to remember how to work right." He helped her to the bathroom, steadying her when she swayed, giving her privacy but staying close enough to hear if she fell. When she emerged a few minutes later, her face was clean for the first time, and Noah could finally see the full extent of the damage. The bruising was worse than he'd thought, spreading across her cheekbone in shades of purple and green. Her lip was split, and there were finger-shaped marks on her throat where someone had choked her hard enough to leave impressions. "You should see the other guys," she said, catching him staring. "Did you fight back?" "Like hell." A fierce light sparked in her eyes. "Broke one guy's nose. Got the other one in the groin hard enough that he'll be singing soprano for a while. But there were 3 of them, and they had training, military, maybe. I didn't stand a chance." Noah helped her back to the bedroom, but she shook her head. "I can't just lie there anymore. I need to think, to plan. Is there coffee? Yeah, but it's terrible. I'm a billionaire who just spent 36 hours buried alive, trust me. I'm not picky." They settled in the living room, Madeline wrapped in one of Emily's old quilts, the one Noah could never quite bring himself to throw away. She cradled the coffee mug in both hands, savoring the warmth, and for a moment she looked almost normal. almost like any other person seeking refuge from a hard night. But then Ethan walked in, and Noah saw his son's eyes go wide at the full sight of her injuries, at the reality of violence written across her skin. This was what Noah had wanted to shield him from, the darkness that existed outside their quiet forest life. "Hi," Madeline said softly. "You must be Ethan. Your dad told me you were the one who heard me calling for help." Ethan nodded, suddenly shy. "I thought it was an animal at first, like a fox or something." "Lucky for me, you have good ears." She smiled, and despite the split lip and swollen eye, there was warmth in it, genuine gratitude. "You saved my life. Both of you did." "Why did they do that to you?" Ethan asked, the bluntness of youth cutting through social niceties. "The people who buried you, why?" Noah started to intervene, to tell his son that wasn't an appropriate question, but Madeline held up a hand. "It's okay. He deserves to know, considering he's risking his safety to help me." She took a sip of coffee, gathering her thoughts. "You know how in video games, sometimes you have to fight a boss to get to the next level?" Ethan nodded. "Well, in real life, sometimes the boss doesn't want you to reach that next level. Sometimes they want to keep all the power and all the treasure for themselves, so they try to eliminate the player." She paused. "That's what happened to me. I built something valuable, and someone decided they wanted it more than they wanted me alive." "That's messed up," Ethan said quietly. "Yeah, it really is." Madeline looked down at her coffee, and Noah saw something flicker across her face. Grief? Maybe. Or disappointment in a world that had proven itself more brutal than she'd wanted to believe. "The really messed up part is that I trusted him. Richard was my friend. We built the company together, stayed up nights coding, eating terrible takeout, dreaming about changing the world. And somewhere along the way, he stopped seeing me as a partner and started seeing me as an obstacle." Noah leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "You said he has connections. How deep do they go?" "Deep enough that when I disappeared, the investigation got buried under so much red tape it might as well be in a grave next to where you found me. The FBI agent assigned to my case? His kid goes to a private school that Cross Technology is endowed with a $10 million grant. The district attorney? Her campaign was funded by Richard's PIAS. The police chief? His pension fund is heavily invested in our stock." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Richard spent years building a web of influence, and I was too busy actually running the company to notice." "So who can you trust?" Noah asked. "Honestly, right now the only people I trust are sitting in this room." She looked between Noah and Ethan, her expression serious. "And I know that's not fair to you. I know I'm asking you to risk everything for a stranger. But I don't have anywhere else to go, and if I surface too early before I have proof of what Richard did, I'll be dead before I can tell my story." "What kind of proof are you talking about?" Madeline's eyes sharpened, the strategic mind that had built a billion-dollar empire clicking into gear. "The men who grabbed me, they weren't amateurs. They knew my schedule, my security codes, even my private elevator access. That kind of information doesn't just leak. Someone inside my own company fed it to them. If I can find out who, if I can trace the money Richard paid them, I can build a case that even his connections can't bury." "And how exactly do you plan to do that from my cabin in the middle of nowhere?" Noah asked. "I need access to my company's servers, to the financial records, to the security footage from the night I was taken. It's all there, locked behind firewalls I designed myself." She smiled grimly. "Which means I'm one of the few people on Earth who can actually break through them." "You need a computer." "I need more than that. I need a completely secure connection, hardware that can't be traced, and about 48 hours of uninterrupted time to dig through a decade of financial records." She paused. "And maybe some ibuprofen. Everything hurts." Noah stood, moving to the medicine cabinet. "I can help with the ibuprofen. The rest of it, I'm not sure. The internet out here is satellite only, and it's not exactly what you'd call fast or secure. It'll have to do. I can route through enough proxy servers to make tracing me nearly impossible, and I designed most of our security protocols myself. I know the back doors." She accepted the pills he offered, swallowing them dry. "The bigger problem is that the moment I start poking around, Richard's people will know someone's trying to access restricted files. They'll start looking for me. Really looking." "Then maybe you shouldn't," Noah started, but Madeline cut him off. I don't have a choice. Every hour I wait is an hour Richard spends consolidating power, rewriting history, making my version of events look like the ravings of a mentally unstable woman. He's probably already planting stories about me having a breakdown, about erratic behavior, about maybe running away to escape the pressure of running a major corporation. Her jaw tightened. I've seen him do it before to other people who got in his way. He's very good at destroying reputations. Noah wanted to argue, wanted to tell her that there had to be another way, a safer way. But he recognized the look in her eyes because he'd seen it in the mirror plenty of times. The look of someone who'd made a decision and would see it through no matter the cost. Okay, he said finally. We'll set you up with my laptop. It's nothing fancy, but it works. You do what you need to do and I'll keep watch. I'll help too, Ethan offered quickly. I mean, I don't know anything about hacking or whatever, but I can be a lookout. I'm good at that. Madeline's expression softened. You're a good kid, Ethan. Your dad raised you right. My mom helped, Ethan said quietly, and Noah felt his chest tighten. The kid didn't talk about Emily much, kept most of his grief locked away where he thought it couldn't hurt anyone. But every now and then she surfaced in little moments like this, reminders that she'd been real, that she'd mattered. I'm sure she did, Madeline said gently, and I'm sure she'd be proud of the person you're becoming. They spent the rest of the morning setting up a makeshift command center at the kitchen table. Noah's laptop was 5 years old and held together with duct tape in 3 places, but Madeline's fingers flew across the keyboard like she'd been born doing it. She muttered to herself as she worked, technical jargon that Noah couldn't follow, cursing occasionally when she hit a firewall or a security protocol that wouldn't bend to her will. Ethan watched in fascination, abandoning his homework entirely. How did you learn to do all this? He asked. Started when I was about your age, actually. My mom worked 2 jobs to keep us fed, so I spent a lot of time alone. Taught myself to code from library books and online tutorials. She glanced up, a slight smile on her battered face. Turns out being poor and bored is excellent motivation to learn skills that might make you not poor someday. And it worked? Better than I ever imagined. Better than I probably deserved. She turned back to the screen. Though right now, I'd trade every dollar I ever made to go back to being broke and safe instead of rich and hunted. Would you really? Noah asked from where he stood by the window, watching the tree line. Madeline paused, considering the question seriously. No, she admitted. No, I wouldn't, because then I wouldn't have built the company, wouldn't have created jobs for thousands of people, wouldn't have developed security software that protects millions of users every day. The money's nice, but it was never the point. The point was making something that mattered. She looked at Noah directly. I imagine you understand that. You could probably make more money doing something else, but you chose to be a ranger, to protect this forest, to help people who get lost, to teach kids like Ethan how to respect and appreciate the wilderness. That's not about money. That's about purpose. Noah felt something shift in his chest, a recognition of kindred spirit. Yeah, he said softly. Yeah, it is. They worked through lunch, Madeline refusing to stop even when Noah brought her a sandwich. She ate mechanically, one hand on the keyboard, her focus absolute. And slowly, piece by piece, she began to unravel the conspiracy that had tried to bury her. There, she said finally, around 3 in the afternoon. Her voice was hoarse with exhaustion and triumph. There's the first thread. Noah and Ethan crowded around the laptop. On the screen was a financial document, numbers and account codes that meant nothing to Noah, but clearly meant everything to Madeline. This is a wire transfer from Richard's personal account to an offshore shell company 2 days before I disappeared. $5 million. She scrolled down. And here's another transfer from that same shell company to a security contractor based in Virginia. $3 million paid the day after I was taken. That's the proof? Ethan asked. It's a start, but I need more. I need the security footage, the phone records, the emails between Richard and whoever helped him coordinate this. Her fingers were already moving again, diving deeper into the digital labyrinth. This is going to take time. How much time? Noah asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. All night, probably, maybe longer. Richard didn't get where he is by being sloppy. He'll have covered his tracks well. I just have to be better at finding them than he was at hiding them. Noah glanced out the window. The afternoon was fading, shadows stretching long across the clearing. Another night was coming, And with it, another chance for whoever wanted Madeline dead to realize their mistake and come to correct it. "You should rest first," he said. "Even just a few hours, you're running on empty." "I can rest when I'm not being hunted." But even as she said it, he could see her swaying slightly, exhaustion pulling at her like gravity. "I just need some more coffee, and maybe—" She didn't finish the sentence. Her eyes rolled back and she slumped forward, her body finally surrendering to the trauma and exhaustion it had been fighting for 2 days. Noah caught her before she hit the table, his combat medic reflexes taking over. "Is she okay?" Ethan's voice was tight with worry. Noah checked her pulse, her breathing. Both were steady, if weak. "She's okay. Her body just shut down to force her to rest. Help me get her back to bed." Together they carried her to Noah's room, laying her gently on the bed. In sleep, with her face relaxed, she looked younger, more vulnerable. The bruises stood out starkly against her pale skin, and Noah found himself wondering what kind of man could order this done to another human being. What kind of moral calculus let someone bury a friend alive for money and power? "Dad," Ethan said quietly from the doorway, "are we going to be able to keep her safe?" It was the same question Noah had been asking himself for the past 24 hours, and he still didn't have a good answer. "I'm going to try," he said, which was honest, if not reassuring. "That's what you said about Mom." The words hit Noah like a physical blow. Ethan's face immediately crumpled, horror at what he'd just said written across every feature. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean— Dad, I'm so sorry." Noah crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled his son into a fierce hug. "It's okay. It's okay, I know." "I miss her," Ethan said, his voice muffled against Noah's shirt. "And I'm scared. What if the bad people come? What if they hurt you? I can't lose you too, Dad." "You won't." Noah held his son tighter, made a promise he desperately hoped he could keep. "I swear to you, Ethan, you won't lose me. Whatever happens, I will keep you safe." They stood like that for a long moment, father and son, holding on to each other against the darkness that threatened to swallow them whole. Finally, Ethan pulled back, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "What do we do now?" he asked. "Now we prepare. If they're coming, I want to be ready." Noah spent the next hour doing exactly that. He checked his rifle, cleaned his sidearm, inventoried his ammunition. He wasn't a violent man by nature, had seen enough violence in the army to last several lifetimes, but he knew how to fight when fighting was necessary. And protecting his son, protecting Madeline, was necessary. He also set up a perimeter of sorts, little tricks he'd learned overseas. Fishing lines strung between trees that would trigger wind chimes if broken. Motion-activated lights aimed at the driveway. His trail cameras repositioned to cover the approaches to the cabin. It wasn't much, but it might buy them precious seconds if someone came. As darkness fell, Noah found himself back on the porch, rifle across his knees, watching and waiting. The forest at night was a different place than it was during the day, full of sounds that could be anything or nothing. Every snapping twig made him tense. Every rustle in the undergrowth brought his finger closer to the trigger. Around midnight, Ethan appeared with 2 cups of coffee, settling onto the porch step beside his father. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the kind that only comes from years of shared grief and mutual understanding. "You think she's going to make it?" Ethan asked eventually. "Ms. Cross, I mean." "I don't know. She's tough, tougher than she looks. But tough only gets you so far when you're up against people with unlimited resources and no conscience." "Like we were tough when Mom got sick?" Noah took a slow breath. They rarely talked about Emily's final months, the endless hospital visits, the treatments that promised hope but delivered only more suffering, the slow and terrible waiting for the inevitable. "Yeah," he said quietly, "like that. Except this time, there's actually something we can do." "You mean besides wait for her to die?" The bitterness in his son's voice was new, sharp-edged, and painful. Noah wanted to tell him that it hadn't been like that they'd fought, that they'd tried everything. But the truth was that Ethan wasn't entirely wrong. In the end, all they could do was wait and watch as cancer consumed the woman they both loved. "I couldn't save your mother," Noah said, the words coming slowly, painfully. "No matter what I did, no matter how hard I fought, or how much I prayed, or how many doctors I found, I couldn't save her, and that's something I'm going to have to live with for the rest of my life. He looked at his son, saw Emily's eyes looking back at him. But Madeline, she's different. The threat to her is human. It's something I can fight. Maybe that's selfish. Maybe I'm projecting my own need to save someone onto her. But right now she needs help and I can give it. So I'm going to. Ethan nodded slowly, processing this. Okay, he said finally. Then we'll help her together. No. Noah's voice was firm. If things go bad, if people come, I need you to take Madeline and run. There's a trail behind the cabin that leads to the old fire tower. You remember it? Yeah, but no buts. You take her there, you hide, and you don't come back until I come get you. Promise me, Ethan. His son's jaw set in a stubborn line Noah recognized from 1,000 arguments with Emily. What if you don't come? What if something happens to you and I'm just supposed to hide and wait and not know if you're alive or dead? Or then you wait until morning and you call the number I'm going to give you. It's a friend from my army days, someone I trust completely. You tell him what happened and he'll get you and Madeline somewhere safe. Noah pulled out his wallet, extracting a worn business card. Marcus Chen, he's FBI, but he's clean. He owes me his life from Afghanistan, and he'll move heaven and earth to protect you if I ask him to. Ethan took the card with shaking hands. You're scaring me, Dad. Good. Fear keeps you alert, keeps you alive. I need you to understand that this is serious, that the people who tried to kill Madeline won't hesitate to kill us if we get in their way. Then maybe we should call this Marcus guy now. Let him handle it. I considered that, but Madeline's right about one thing. We don't know how deep the corruption goes. Even if Marcus is clean, his superiors might not be. The moment we bring in official channels, we lose control of the situation. At least here, on my ground. He stopped mid-sentence, his body going rigid. There, at the edge of his hearing, was the sound of an engine, distant but growing closer. A vehicle on the access road, moving slowly, deliberately, with its headlights off. Inside, Noah hissed, already moving. Now! Ethan scrambled to his feet and through the door. Noah followed, killing the lights, moving through the cabin by memory and feel. He found Ethan in the hallway outside his bedroom, eyes wide in the darkness. Get Madeline up, Noah whispered. Be quiet. Get her dressed and ready to move. If I tell you to run, you run. You understand? Ethan nodded and slipped into the bedroom. Noah moved to the window, peering through the curtain. He couldn't see the vehicle yet, but he could track its progress by sound, by the way the nightbirds went suddenly silent as it passed. They were good, whoever they were, approaching without lights, probably using night vision. But Noah was good too. He'd survived 2 tours in Afghanistan not by being the toughest or the meanest, but by being smart, by understanding terrain, by knowing how to use every advantage available. And this was his terrain. His phone buzzed softly. A text from his trail camera system. Motion detected. North approach. He pulled up the image and felt his stomach drop. 2 vehicles, black SUVs, stopped about half a mile out. 4 men visible, all armed, all moving with military precision toward the cabin. They'd found her. Somehow, some way, they'd found her. Noah's mind raced through options, scenarios, possible outcomes. 4 armed men against 1 ranger with a hunting rifle and a boy to protect. The math wasn't good, but he had the high ground, he had cover, and he had something they didn't, everything to lose. Ethan emerged from the bedroom with Madeline leaning heavily on his shoulder. She was awake but groggy, confusion written across her face. When she saw Noah's expression, though, the confusion cleared, replaced by sharp, terrible understanding. "They're here," she said. Not a question. 4 men, heavily armed, approaching from the north. We have maybe 5 minutes before they reach the cabin. Then we run! Her voice was steady despite the fear in her eyes. You know this forest better than they do. We can lose them in the dark. With you barely able to walk, we'd make it maybe a quarter mile before they ran us down. Noah moved to the gun cabinet, pulling out his .45 and extra magazines. No, running just gets us all killed. We need a different plan. What kind of plan? Ethan's voice was admirably steady, his mother's courage showing through. Noah looked at his son, at Madeline, at the home he'd built in the years since Emily died. Then he made a decision he hoped he wouldn't regret. You 2 are going to hide. There's a root cellar under the kitchen floor, reinforced concrete, hidden under the rug. You're going to get down there, and you're not coming out until I tell you it's safe." "What are you going to do?" Madeline asked. "What I'm trained to do. I'm going to defend my home." "Against 4 armed men? That's suicide." "Maybe, but it's our best shot. If I can take out 1 or 2, make them think twice, buy you time to really escape, then it's worth it." He handed the .45 to Madeline. "You know how to use this? Point and pull the trigger?" "Close enough. Safety's here. 15 rounds. Don't use it unless you absolutely have to." He turned to Ethan. "Show her the cellar. Get inside. Stay quiet no matter what you hear. And if I don't come back—" "You're coming back," Ethan said fiercely. "You promised." "I'll try, son. I swear I'll try." Noah pulled his boy into a quick, hard hug. "I love you. Never forget that." "I love you too, Dad." Then they were moving, Noah helping them open the hidden trapdoor, watching as they climbed down into the darkness below. He closed it behind them, repositioned the rug, scattered the kitchen chairs to make it look undisturbed. From below, he could hear nothing. Good. If he couldn't hear them, neither would anyone else. Noah moved through the cabin one last time, turning it from a home into a battlefield. He opened windows for better sight lines, arranged furniture for cover, positioned spare ammunition where he could reach it quickly. His hands were steady, his mind clear. This was what training was for, what all those years in uniform had prepared him for. Not the killing, though he'd done that when necessary, but the protection, the willingness to stand between danger and the people who depended on him. He thought of Emily, wondered if she was watching somehow, wondered if she'd understand what he was about to do. She'd never liked his military service, had hated the idea of him in danger, had made him promise when they got married that he'd never volunteer for anything that might get him killed. He'd kept that promise right up until cancer made it meaningless. What was a bullet compared to losing her inch by inch, day by day, to a disease that no amount of courage or training could fight? At least this was a fight he understood. The motion sensor on his phone chimed again. They were close now, spreading out to surround the cabin. Professional, careful, taking no chances. Noah moved to his primary position, a spot by the living room window with clear sight lines and good cover. He chambered around, the mechanical sound loud in the quiet cabin, and settled in to wait. His phone lit up one more time, a final text from the camera system. Then he powered it down completely, eliminating any signal that might give away their presence. The cabin fell silent except for his own breathing, slow and controlled, the way they'd taught him in sniper training. He wasn't a sniper, had never been comfortable taking life from a distance, but he remembered the lessons. Breathe, focus. Wait for the shot. Through the window, he saw the first shadow detach itself from the tree line, then another. They moved well, covering each other, advancing by bounds. Definitely military training, probably contractors like Madeline had said, men who killed for money and called it a job. Noah's finger found the trigger. His mind went quiet, empty of everything except the immediate tactical situation. 4 targets. Unknown weapons. Unknown armor. He'd aim for center mass on the first shot, adjust based on results. The goal wasn't to kill them all. That would be impossible. The goal was to make them reconsider, to cost them enough that they'd back off and regroup, buying time for a real escape. The first man reached the porch. Noah could see him clearly now through the scope. Late 30s, well-built, moving with the confidence of someone who'd done this many times before. He tried the door handle, found it locked, and gestured to his partners. Noah made a decision. He could wait for them to breach, to come inside where the close quarters would limit their advantages. Or he could take the initiative, strike first, set the tone for the engagement. He chose initiative. The rifle cracked, loud in the night silence, and the man on the porch went down with a scream, clutching his leg. Noah had aimed low deliberately, wanting to wound rather than kill. A wounded man was a tactical problem for the others, someone who needed help, who would slow them down and eat up resources. Chaos erupted outside. The other 3 scattered for cover, weapons up, searching for the source of the shot. Noah was already moving, changing position, using the confusion. He fired twice more, both shots missing but forcing the men to keep their heads down, preventing them from organizing a proper assault. Then the return fire started, and Noah learned exactly what he was up against. automatic weapons, probably M4s or similar, tearing through the cabin walls like paper. He threw himself flat as rounds punched through the space where he'd been standing, tracking his muzzle flash. These weren't security guards or local cops. These were professionals, and they'd come prepared for serious resistance. Noah belly-crawled to a new position, his mind cataloging the sound. 3 shooters, just like he'd thought. The 4th was down or out of the fight. That was something, but 3 automatic weapons against his bolt-action rifle was a losing equation no matter how he worked the math. A voice called out from the darkness, amplified by a bullhorn. "Noah Briggs, we know you're in there. We know Madeline Cross is with you. Send her out and we'll leave. You have our word." Noah almost laughed. Their word. Like that meant anything to men who buried women alive for money. He said nothing, conserving ammunition, waiting for an opportunity. "We don't want to hurt you or your son," the voice continued. "This isn't about you. This is a private business matter. Send out Ms. Cross and walk away." Still, Noah remained silent. Let them wonder. Let them worry. Every second they spent talking was a second they weren't attacking, a second closer to dawn and possible help. But they were done talking. The assault came hard and fast, 2 men providing covering fire while the 3rd rushed the door. Noah aimed carefully and fired, catching the rushing man in the shoulder. Not a killing shot, but enough to spin him around and send him scrambling back to cover. 2 wounded now. Good. But his ammunition was running low, and they'd learned where he was shooting from. The next burst of automatic fire was concentrated, deliberate, turning his cover into kindling. He rolled away, feeling splinters bite into his face, and came up firing. 1 shot, 2, forcing them back again. Then his rifle clicked empty. Noah dropped it and drew his backup weapon, the old .38 revolver he'd carried as a ranger, 5 shots only. It wouldn't stop body armor, would barely slow them down, but it was all he had left. He could hear them regrouping, probably discussing tactics, deciding how to finish this. From below the floor, there was a sound so faint he almost missed it. A cough. Madeline, unable to stop the reflex, giving away their position. The shooting stopped. In the sudden silence, Noah heard the voice again, close now, right outside the cabin. "We heard that, Mr. Briggs. They're in the house, aren't they? Under the floor, maybe? That's smart. But it doesn't matter. We're coming in, and we're taking Miss Cross, and anyone who gets in our way dies. Last chance. Walk away." Noah's hand tightened on the revolver. He thought of Ethan down there in the dark, terrified, depending on his father to protect him. He thought of Madeline, who'd already survived 1 grave and didn't deserve to die in another. He thought of Emily and the promise he'd made at her funeral to keep their son safe no matter what. "No," he said quietly, just loud enough to be heard. "Come and try." The silence that followed Noah's refusal was absolute, the kind of quiet that comes right before violence breaks loose like a thunderstorm. He could hear his own heartbeat, could feel the sweat running down his back despite the cool night air pouring through the bullet-riddled walls. 5 rounds in the revolver, 3 men still standing. The math was simple and brutal. Then the world exploded. They hit the cabin from 2 sides simultaneously, the door and the back window, a coordinated breach that spoke of extensive training. Noah fired twice at the door, saw 1 man stumble back, but the other was already inside, moving with predatory speed. Noah dove behind the overturned couch as automatic fire tore through the space where he'd been standing, the muzzle flash bright enough to leave afterimages dancing in his vision. He came up firing, 1 shot that caught the man in the thigh below his body armor, and the shooter went down hard. But the one from the window was on him now, and Noah felt the stock of a rifle slam into his ribs with enough force to crack bone. He gasped, the pain white-hot and immediate, and the revolver tumbled from his grip. A boot connected with his stomach, driving what little air remained from his lungs. Noah curled around the pain, his combat training screaming at him to fight back, to move, to do something, but his body wasn't responding fast enough. Another kick, this one to his face, and he tasted blood, felt his nose break with a sickening crunch. "Stupid," the man said, his voice flat and professional. "Really stupid, playing hero? Where's the woman?" Noah said nothing. Couldn't have spoken even if he wanted to. Just focused on breathing, on staying conscious. Through his blurred vision, he could see the man who'd come through the door limping toward them, blood streaming down his leg. 2 wounded, but still functional. And somewhere outside, the 3rd was probably covering their exit. "Check the bedroom," the limping man said. His accent was American, Midwest maybe, ordinary as a hardware store commercial. I'll make him talk. The other man moved off, and Noah heard him tearing through the cabin, throwing open doors, overturning furniture. Above Noah, the limping man crouched down, and Noah saw his face clearly for the first time. Late 30s, clean-shaven, the kind of face that could belong to anyone. A father, a husband, someone who coached Little League on weekends. Except his eyes were cold, empty of anything resembling empathy. You're a veteran, the man said conversationally, pressing his rifle barrel against Noah's broken ribs. The pain was extraordinary. I can tell. The way you move, the way you set up your defenses. Army? Noah spat blood, said nothing. Army, the man confirmed, as if Noah had answered. Me too. 3rd Ranger Battalion, 6 years. Got out when I realized I could make more money in a month as a contractor than in a year working for Uncle Sam. You understand that, right? It's just business, nothing personal. Beating but burying women alive, and Noah managed through his broken nose. That's your business? Sometimes. Usually it's corporate espionage, witness protection breaking, the occasional hostile extraction. This job? He shrugged. This was supposed to be simple cleanup. Our employer said the target was contained, that we just needed to verify and sanitize the site, but you had to go and complicate things. The other man returned from his search, shaking his head. Nothing. Bedroom's empty, bathroom's empty. They're not here. They're here. The one standing over Noah pressed harder on his ribs, and Noah couldn't stop the scream that tore from his throat. I heard someone cough. This place isn't that big. They have to be... Wait. His eyes narrowed, scanning the cabin with new purpose. The floor. Check for a hidden space. Noah's heart seized. Below him, maybe 10 feet away, Ethan and Madeline were pressed into the darkness of the root cellar, listening to every word. If these men found them, if they pulled up that trap door, his son would watch him die before they killed him too. The thought gave Noah strength he didn't know he had left. He moved fast, grabbing the rifle barrel pressed against his chest and yanking hard. The man above him wasn't expecting it, stumbled forward off balance, and Noah drove his knee up into the man's groin with every ounce of force he could muster. The man went down with a strangled gasp, and Noah was already rolling, ignoring the screaming agony in his ribs, going for the revolver he'd dropped. His fingers closed around the grip just as the other man brought his weapon to bear. Noah fired from the ground. No time to aim properly, just point and shoot. The first round missed. The second didn't, catching the man's center mass. The body armor stopped the bullet from penetrating, but the kinetic force was enough to knock him backward, give Noah the second he needed. He fired again, this time aiming for the leg, and was rewarded with a scream and the sound of the man hitting the floor. 2 rounds left. One man still down, but not out. Noah tried to stand, got halfway up before his broken ribs betrayed him and sent him back to his knees, gasping. The man he'd need was recovering, reaching for his rifle, and Noah knew with absolute certainty that he was out of time. He'd fought hard, fought smart, but it wasn't enough. He'd failed. Failed Emily by letting her die. Failed Ethan by getting himself killed. Failed Madeline by... The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space, but it didn't come from Noah's revolver. The man reaching for his rifle jerked, a red flower blooming on his shoulder, and collapsed. Noah's head snapped toward the source of the shot and saw Madeline standing by the overturned kitchen rug, the trapdoor open behind her, the .45 he'd given her held in a 2-handed grip that was surprisingly steady. I told you to stay hidden, Noah said, the words coming out slurred through his broken nose. You were losing, Madeline replied, already moving to check the man she'd shot. I wasn't going to let you die protecting me. Behind her, Ethan climbed out of the cellar, his face white, but his jaw set with determination. Dad, you're bleeding really bad. I'm fine. Noah wasn't fine, was pretty sure he had a concussion to go with the broken ribs and nose, but he forced himself to his feet anyway. We need to move. There's still one more out there, and reinforcements could be coming. No reinforcements, the man Madeline had shot said through gritted teeth. He was holding his shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers, but his voice was steady. Professional to the end. This was supposed to be a quick in and out. 4 men, no backup. Our employer wanted deniability. Richard Vance? Madeline asked, moving closer but keeping the gun trained on him. Don't know any names. We get orders through a cutout, payment, and crypto. But yeah, the contract was for a woman matching your description, last seen in these woods. He laughed, wincing at the pain. You're supposed to be dead. The fact that you're standing here with a gun is going to cause someone a lot of problems. Good, Madeline said coldly. Where's your fourth man? Outside, probably wondering why we haven't called in success. You've got maybe 2 minutes before he comes to check, and trust me, you don't want to fight him. He's the one they send when the first team fails. Noah moved to the window, careful to stay out of the sight lines. He could see movement in the tree line, a shadow that didn't quite match the darkness around it. The wounded man was right. They didn't have much time. Ethan, pack a bag. Food, water, first aid kit, anything we might need for 2 days in the woods. Move fast. Noah turned to Madeline. Can you walk? Really walk, not just tough it out. I can do whatever I have to do, she said, which wasn't really an answer but would have to be enough. Then here's what's going to happen. We're going out the east window, the one they haven't covered. There's a trail about 50 yards into the woods that will take us up to the ridge. From there, we can make it to the old fire tower by dawn if we push hard. And then what? Madeline asked. We can't hide forever. We don't have to. We just have to hide long enough for you to finish what you started, to get the evidence you need. Then we take it to someone who can actually help us. He pulled out his wallet, extracted Marcus Chen's card, handed it to her. FBI, my friend from the Army. If something happens to me, you call him. Tell him Noah Briggs sent you and he'll move heaven and earth to keep you safe. Nothing's going to happen to you, Ethan said fiercely, returning with a pack stuffed with supplies. You promised. I'm planning to keep that promise, son, but plans don't always work out. Noah grabbed his emergency pack, the one he kept ready for wilderness rescues, and slung it over his shoulder despite the screaming protest from his ribs. We need to go now. They moved to the east window, and Noah helped Madeline through first, then Ethan. He was about to follow when the wounded man spoke up. You should kill us, he said matter-of-factly. That's what I'd do in your position. 3 witnesses who can identify you, testify about what happened here. Smart play is to put a bullet in each of us and disappear. Noah looked at him, at the professional killer bleeding on his cabin floor, at the cold calculation in his eyes. I'm not you, he said quietly. And I'm not going to become you just because it's convenient. Then you're going to die. Maybe not today, but soon. Because our employer doesn't accept failure, and you just made yourself a very expensive problem. I'll take my chances. Noah climbed through the window, dropped to the ground outside, and immediately his legs nearly gave out. The adrenaline was wearing off, and with it came the full weight of his injuries. Madeline was there instantly, slipping under his arm, supporting his weight. I've got you, she said, echoing his own words from what felt like a lifetime ago. The trail's that way, Noah pointed. Stay low, stay quiet, and if shooting starts, you run and don't look back. Ethan knows where to go. They moved as fast as they could, which wasn't nearly fast enough. Noah could hear himself breathing, harsh and ragged, knew he was slowing them down. 50 yards felt like 50 miles, and when they finally reached the tree line, he had to stop, had to lean against a trunk and fight the darkness creeping in at the edges of his vision. Dad? Ethan's voice was small, scared. Give me a second. Just need a second. Noah forced himself to focus, to push past the pain. They'd made it maybe 100 yards from the cabin when he heard the shout behind them, the sound of discovery. The fourth man had found his wounded teammates, knew they'd escaped. Go, Noah urged. The trail's right there. Follow it up. I'll catch up. We're not leaving you, Madeline said firmly. You don't have a choice. I can barely walk, let alone run, and he's going to be coming fast. You need to... The muzzle flash lit up the darkness behind them, and a tree trunk exploded in splinters inches from Noah's head. No more time for discussion. Madeline grabbed Ethan's hand and ran, and Noah forced his battered body to follow, each step an exercise in agony. The trail was steep, winding up through old-growth forest where the canopy blocked out even the starlight. They climbed in near total darkness, hands reaching out to steady themselves on trees, feet finding purchase by feel more than sight. Behind them, Noah could hear their pursuer, could track his progress by the beam of his tactical flashlight sweeping through the trees. He was gaining on them. Noah's lungs were burning, his ribs screaming with every breath, but he pushed on. Ahead, he could hear Ethan and Madeline, their footsteps on the trail, and he focused on that sound, used it to pull himself forward. Just keep moving. Just stay alive long enough to get them to safety. That was all that mattered. The trail leveled out briefly, and Noah risked a glance back. The flashlight beam was closer, maybe 50 yards behind. Too close. At this rate, the man would run them down before they made it halfway to the fire tower. Noah made a decision he'd been avoiding, the one he'd known was coming since they left the cabin. He stopped running. "Dad?" Ethan's voice carried back through the darkness. "Keep going," Noah called out. "Don't stop, don't look back. I'll catch up." "No!" Ethan was running back toward him, Madeline right behind. "Dad, we're not leaving you." "You don't have a choice." Noah grabbed his son, pulled him close, memorized the feel of him for what might be the last time. "I'm slowing you down, and he's going to catch us if we stay together, so I'm going to give you a head start." "By dying?" Tears were streaming down Ethan's face. "I can't lose you too, Dad. Please don't make me lose you too." "You won't." Noah forced confidence he didn't feel into his voice. "I'm just going to slow him down, maybe convince him to give up the chase. Then I'll follow your trail and meet you at the tower. I promise." "You can't promise that," Madeline said quietly. "You don't know if you can keep it."
"No," Noah admitted. "But I can promise that I'll try with everything I have, and I can promise that if I don't do this, we all die right here on this trail." He pressed his revolver into her hand, the last 2 rounds still in the cylinder. "Take care of my son, please." Madeline looked at him for a long moment, and Noah saw understanding pass between them, the wordless acknowledgement of what he was about to do. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." "Go." They went, Ethan looking back every few steps until the darkness swallowed them completely. Noah waited until he couldn't hear their footsteps anymore, then turned to face the approaching light. His body was done, running on fumes and stubbornness, but his mind was clear. He'd bought them maybe 5 minutes, maybe 10 if he was smart about it. Time to be smart. He moved off the trail, found a position behind a fallen log that gave him good sight lines and decent cover. The flashlight beam was close now, maybe 20 yards, sweeping back and forth across the trail. Noah could see the man behind it, tall and broad-shouldered, moving with the easy confidence of someone who'd done this 100 times. "I know you're there," the man called out, his voice carrying through the trees. "I can hear you breathing, and I know you're hurt, that you can barely stand, so here's my offer. You tell me where the woman is, and I'll make this quick. You don't, and I take my time. Your choice." Noah said nothing, conserving his energy, watching the man's approach. He had no weapon, no way to actually stop him, but maybe he didn't need to stop him. Maybe he just needed to buy a few more minutes, to give Ethan and Madeline enough of a lead that they could escape. "Suit yourself?" The man continued forward, and Noah could see him clearly now. Older than the others, maybe mid-40s, with the kind of face that had seen too much and stopped caring about most of it. He held his rifle in a ready position, finger on the trigger, scanning for threats. Noah picked up a rock, hefted it for weight, and threw it off to the left. It cracked against a tree trunk, and the man spun toward the sound, rifle coming up. Noah threw another rock in a different direction, then a third. The man stopped, recognizing the tactic. "Cute," he said, "but I've been doing this longer than you've been alive, soldier. You think you can distract me with rocks? You think—" Noah's legs gave out then, not from any tactical decision, but from simple physical collapse. He went down hard, and the sound of his fall was like a beacon. The flashlight beam swung around, pinned him where he lay, and the man was moving toward him with his rifle raised. "Found you," the man said with satisfaction. "Now, where's—" The shot came from nowhere, a sharp crack that echoed through the forest. The man jerked, his flashlight dropping, and Noah saw a red stain spreading across his chest. He went down slowly, almost gracefully, and by the time he hit the ground, he wasn't moving anymore. Noah's head snapped around, searching for the shooter, and saw a figure emerge from the trees. Not Madeline, not Ethan, someone else, someone carrying a rifle and moving with military precision. Noah tried to push himself up, to run or fight or do anything, but his body simply refused to cooperate anymore. The figure approached, and as they got closer, Noah saw it was a man,
early 50s, with close-cropped gray hair and the bearing of a career military officer. He checked the downed shooter efficiently, confirmed he was dead, then turned his attention to Noah. "Noah Briggs?" he asked. "Who's asking?" Noah managed through broken ribs and exhaustion. "Marcus Chen, FBI, in Blackwood Forest, decided to check it out." He helped Noah sit up, started field dressing the worst of his injuries. "When those SUVs showed up at your place, I called for backup. They're about 20 minutes out." 20 minutes might be too late," Noah said. "My son, Madeline, they're heading for the old fire tower. They need—" "Already taken care of. I've got 2 agents moving to intercept, provide protection." Marcus pulled out a radio. "This is Chen. I've got Noah Briggs, multiple injuries but stable. Requesting immediate medical evac to my position. Also confirming 4 hostile contractors down, 1 deceased, 3 wounded. We're going to need a cleanup team." The radio crackled with acknowledgement, and Marcus helped Noah to his feet. "Can you walk?" "Not well, but I can manage." Noah started up the trail, each step an exercise in willpower. "I need to get to my son. Need to make sure he's okay." "He will be. My people are good." But Marcus stayed close, ready to catch Noah if he fell. "You want to tell me what the hell happened here? How you ended up in the middle of a billion-dollar conspiracy?" So as they climbed, Noah told him about finding Madeline buried alive, about her story of betrayal, about the attack on his cabin and the desperate escape. Marcus listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. "Richard Vance," he said when Noah finished. "I've been looking at him, but carefully. He's got powerful friends, and I needed ironclad evidence before I could move. Sounds like Ms. Cross might be able to provide that." "If she's still alive." Noah pushed himself faster, ignoring the way his vision swam. "If your people got to her in time." They reached the fire tower just as dawn was breaking, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Noah saw 2 figures in FBI windbreakers standing guard, and between them, sitting on the tower steps, were Ethan and Madeline. His son looked up as they approached, and the relief on his face was almost painful to see. "Dad!" Ethan was running, crashing into Noah with enough force to nearly knock him over. "You're alive! You're alive!" "Told you I'd keep my promise," Noah said, wrapping his arms around his son despite the agony it caused. "Always keep my promises." Madeline stood more slowly, favoring her own injuries, but there was something different about her expression, a hardness that hadn't been there before, mixed with gratitude and something that might have been respect. "You bought us enough time," she said. "I got into my company's servers, pulled everything we need, Richard's communications, the financial transfers, even security footage of him meeting with the contractors. It's all there." "Then it's over," Noah said. "You're safe." "Not yet." Marcus approached, showing his badge to Madeline. "We still need to build a prosecutable case, get warrants, coordinate with multiple jurisdictions. That's going to take time, and Vance is going to know something's wrong when his cleanup team doesn't report back. We need to get all of you somewhere secure. Keep you protected until we can move on him." "How long?" Madeline asked. 48 hours, maybe 72, fast as we can make it." Marcus pulled out his phone. "I've got a safe house outside Portland, secure facility with everything you'll need. We'll transport you there, keep a team on protection detail until this is resolved." Noah wanted to protest, wanted to go home to his cabin and his life, and pretend none of this had ever happened. But he looked at his son, at the fear still lingering in Ethan's eyes, and knew that going home wasn't an option. Not yet. Not until Richard Vance and everyone involved in trying to kill Madeline were behind bars. "Okay," he said, "but I need a hospital first. Pretty sure I'm concussed, and these ribs aren't getting better on their own." "Already arranged. Medical helicopters en route should be here in 10 minutes. Marcus guided Noah to sit down, and the movement sent fresh waves of pain through his body. "You did good work here, Noah. Saved a life, stopped some very bad people. Your country thanks you for your service." "I didn't do it for my country," Noah said, looking at Ethan and Madeline. "I did it because it was right." The helicopter arrived with the sunrise, a thunderous beating of rotors that scattered the morning birds and turned the clearing into a windstorm. Paramedics swarmed Noah, checking vitals, starting IVs, loading him onto a stretcher. Ethan tried to stay close, but one of the FBI agents gently pulled him back. "We'll follow in the car," Marcus assured the boy. You'll see your dad at the hospital in an hour. He's going to be fine. As they lifted Noah into the helicopter, he caught one last glimpse of the forest, of the trees where he'd made his stand, where he'd chosen to fight instead of run. Emily would have been terrified, would have begged him to just give Madeline up, to protect their son above all else. But she wasn't here, and the choice had been his to make. He'd made it, and he'd make it again. The morphine the paramedics administered pulled him down into darkness, and Noah went willingly, knowing that when he woke up, the world would be different. Madeline would have her evidence, Richard Vance would face justice, and maybe, just maybe, Noah Briggs could go back to being a simple ranger in a quiet forest. But as consciousness faded, his last thought was that simple was overrated.
He'd spent 3 years hiding in these woods, hiding from the pain of Emily's loss, hiding from a world that had taken too much and given too little back. Finding Madeline had forced him back into that world, reminded him that some things were worth fighting for, worth risking everything to protect. And somewhere in that realization, in that choice to stand and fight, Noah Briggs had found a piece of himself he thought had died with his wife. The part that believed in justice, in protecting the vulnerable, in doing what was right even when it cost everything. The helicopter banked away from the forest, carrying Noah toward whatever came next, and behind them, the sun rose over Blackwood State Forest, burning away the morning mist and illuminating every tree, every trail, every secret the darkness had tried to keep hidden. The fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. Richard Vance had resources, connections, power that reached into places Noah couldn't even imagine. But he also had something Vance didn't have anymore. He had Madeline Cross, alive and angry and ready to burn down everything Vance had built on the foundation of her attempted murder. And he had Marcus Chen, an FBI agent who'd spent his career taking down men who thought they were untouchable. Most importantly, he had proof. Madeline's late-night hacking session had pulled treasure trove after treasure trove from Cross Technologies' servers, and somewhere in all that data was the smoking gun they needed. The communication that tied Vance directly to the contractors, the financial transaction that proved premeditation, the security footage that showed his guilt beyond any reasonable doubt. In the hospital room where Noah would wake up several hours later, surrounded by monitors and IV drips and the antiseptic smell of modern medicine, Ethan would be sitting in a chair pulled close to the bed, refusing to leave his father's side. And Madeline would be in the next room, guarded by 2 FBI agents, working on her laptop with the single-minded intensity of someone who'd been given a second chance at life and intended to make the most of it. Marcus Chen would be coordinating with his superiors, arguing for resources, making the case that this was bigger than corporate fraud, bigger than attempted murder. This was about power unchecked, about men who thought they could kill with impunity, about a system that let them get away with it. And somewhere in San Francisco, Richard Vance would be sitting in his office, waiting for a phone call that would never come, slowly realizing that his carefully laid plans had failed, that the woman he'd buried was alive and coming for everything he'd stolen from her. The next 48 hours would be a whirlwind of legal maneuvers, sealed indictments, and coordinated arrests. Marcus and his team would move with surgical precision, rolling up Vance's network of accomplices before any of them could flee or destroy evidence. The contractors who'd survived the fight at Noah's cabin would flip almost immediately, trading testimony for reduced sentences, each confession adding another brick to the wall of evidence. But Noah wouldn't see most of that. He'd spend those crucial hours drifting in and out of consciousness, his body focused on the simple task of healing while the world he'd saved spun on without him. In his morphine dreams, Emily would visit him, not sad or sick, but healthy and whole, smiling at him the way she had on their wedding day. "You did good," she'd tell him in these dreams. "You saved them. You kept our sons safe. I miss you," he'd reply, the words coming easier in sleep than they ever had when he was awake. "I know. But you can't keep hiding from life because I'm not in it anymore. You have to live, Noah. For Ethan, for yourself." She'd touch his face, her hand warm and real despite being impossible. And maybe for her too. That woman you saved, she needs someone who understands what it's like to survive the unsurvivable. Then he'd wake up, the dream fading, and find Ethan asleep in the chair beside him, keeping vigil the way Noah had kept vigil over Emily in her final days. The circle of grief and love and protection continuing generation to generation, each of them trying their best to keep the people they loved safe from a world that was often anything but. Through the window, the sun would be setting again, marking the passage of another day, another rotation of a planet that kept spinning, regardless of the small human dramas playing out on its surface. But to Noah Briggs, to Ethan, to Madeline Cross, this particular drama mattered more than anything, because this was about survival, about justice, about refusing to let evil win just because it was convenient, just because fighting back was hard and dangerous and might cost everything. Noah had fought back, had stood his ground when running would have been easier, had protected when abandoning would have been safer. And in doing so, he'd become part of something larger than himself, part of a story that would echo far beyond the quiet forest where it began. In the morning, when he finally woke up clear-headed and coherent, when the doctors declared him battered but stable, when Marcus came in with news that the warrants had been served and Richard Vance was in federal custody, Noah would ask just one question. "Is it over?" And Marcus would smile, tired but triumphant. "It's over. You can go home." Home. The word felt strange, loaded with meaning Noah was still trying to parse. His cabin was a crime scene, bullet-riddled and blood-stained, uninhabitable until the investigation was complete and repairs could be made. But home wasn't really about the building anyway. It was about the people, about Ethan sitting beside him, about the quiet strength they'd found in each other after Emily's death. Maybe it was about more than that now. Maybe it was also about Madeline, about the bond forged in survival, about two people who'd looked death in the face and refused to blink. Maybe home was expanding, making room for new connections, new possibilities, new reasons to keep fighting even when the world seemed determined to break you. But those were thoughts for another day, another time when his head didn't feel like it had been used as a battering ram, and his ribs didn't scream with every breath. For now, it was enough to know that they'd won, that justice would be served, that evil had been stopped before it could claim another victim. For now, it was enough to be alive. 3 days after the helicopter carried him away from Blackwood Forest, Noah sat in a Portland safe house watching the news coverage of Richard Vance's arrest play out across every major network. The man who'd tried to bury Madeline alive was now the one being buried, crushed under an avalanche of evidence that Marcus Chen and his team had built into an airtight case. The footage showed Vance being led from his San Francisco estate in handcuffs, his expensive suit looking out of place against the backdrop of federal agents and police cruisers. His face was composed, almost serene, the expression of a man who still believed his lawyers and his money could save him. Noah wondered how long that composure would last once he realized the full extent of what Madeline had uncovered. "He looks so normal," Ethan said from his spot on the couch beside Noah. "Like someone's dad, not like someone who kills people." "That's what makes men like him dangerous," Madeline said, from where she stood by the window, her own injuries healing but still visible in the careful way she moved. "They look like everyone else. They smile at charity events and donate to children's hospitals and convince the world they're good people, but underneath, they're capable of things that would give you nightmares." She'd been different since the attack, harder somehow, like something soft inside her had calcified into armor. Noah understood that transformation, had felt it happen to himself in Afghanistan when he'd seen his first combat, realized that the world contained horrors that couldn't be reasoned with or wished away. Some innocence, once lost, could never be recovered. The news anchor was listing the charges now, a litany of crimes that would ensure Vance spent the rest of his life in prison. Attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, kidnapping, wire fraud, obstruction of justice. The list went on, each charge another nail in the coffin of the empire he'd tried to steal. "They're saying you're a hero," Ethan told his father, gesturing at the television where Noah's own face had appeared, a file photo from his army days. "That you rescued Ms. Cross and fought off the bad guys single-handedly." "That's not how it happened," Noah said, uncomfortable with the narrative being woven by reporters who hadn't been there, who hadn't felt the terror or the pain or the absolute certainty that they were all going to die. "I just did what anyone would have done." "No." Madeline turned from the window, and her expression was fierce. "That's not true, and you know it. Most people would have called the police and washed their hands of it. Most people would have prioritized their own safety over a stranger's life. You didn't. You risked everything, and you saved me. Don't diminish that." Noah looked at her, at the intensity in her eyes, and realized something had shifted between them during those desperate hours in the forest. They'd become connected in a way that went beyond gratitude or circumstance, bound together by the kind of shared trauma that either destroyed people or forged them into something stronger. Marcus Chen chose that moment to enter the safe house, carrying a folder thick with documents. He looked tired but satisfied, the expression of a man who'd spent years chasing corruption and finally caught it. "We got him," Marcus said without preamble. "Not just Vance either. 3 members of your board of directors, Madeline. 2 police officials on his payroll. Even a district attorney who'd been taking bribes for years." He tossed the folder onto the coffee table. "Your evidence led us to more evidence, which led us to more. It's like pulling a thread and watching an entire sweater unravel." "How many people?" Madeline asked quietly. "How many people knew what he was doing and said nothing?" "Dozens, maybe more." Marcus sat heavily in an armchair. "Some were actively complicit, helping him cover his tracks or providing inside information. Others just looked the other way because it was easier than asking questions. They all share responsibility for what he did to you." The weight of that settled over the room like a shroud. Noah had spent years in a forest where the predators were honest about what they were, where a bear or a mountain lion killed because it was hungry, not because it wanted power or money or control. The human capacity for betrayal, for choosing convenience over conscience, still had the power to shock him. "What happens now?" Ethan asked. "To Ms. Cross, I mean. Does she go back to running her company?" Madeline laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The company I built with my own hands, that bears my name, that I poured 15 years of my life into? I don't know if I can. Every time I walk into that building, I'll remember that Richard sat across from me in board meetings while planning my murder. That people I trusted, people I considered friends, were willing to let me die so they could profit from my death." She moved to the window again, staring out at the Portland skyline, and Noah saw her shoulders tense with emotion she was fighting to control. He wanted to say something comforting, wanted to tell her it would get easier, but he knew better. After Emily died, people had told him that time would heal the wound, that eventually he'd be able to remember the good times without drowning in the pain of her loss. 3 years later, he was still waiting for that to be true. "You don't have to decide today," Marcus said gently. "Right now, your company is in the hands of an interim CEO appointed by the board, someone we've thoroughly vetted and cleared. They'll keep things running while you figure out what you want to do next." "What I want," Madeline said slowly, "is to make sure this never happens to anyone else. I want to build something that protects people like me, people who trusted the wrong person and nearly paid for it with their lives." "Like what?" Noah asked, genuinely curious. She turned to face them, and Noah saw the spark of an idea taking shape behind her eyes, the same spark that had probably driven her from a scholarship kid in Detroit to a billionaire tech CEO. A foundation, something focused on protecting whistleblowers, exposing corporate corruption, supporting survivors of workplace violence. I could use my resources, my platform, to actually make a difference instead of just making more money. "That's a good idea," Marcus said, "and it would be a hell of a legacy, turning your worst experience into something that helps others." "My worst experience," Madeline repeated, testing the words. "Is that what we're calling attempted murder now? A bad experience, like a delayed flight or a mediocre restaurant?" "I'm sorry," Marcus said. "I didn't mean to minimize." "No, I know. I'm just—" She trailed off, struggling to articulate something Noah recognized from his own grief. "I'm just trying to figure out how to be a person who had this happen to them. How to wake up every morning knowing that someone I trusted wanted me dead. How to trust anyone ever again." Ethan looked at his father, a question in his eyes that Noah knew he needed to answer. His son had been asking versions of that same question since Emily died, trying to understand how you kept living after the world had proven itself capable of unimaginable cruelty. "You do it one day at a time," Noah said, speaking to both Madeline and Ethan. "You wake up and maybe you can't breathe for a few minutes because the weight of it all is crushing you, but then you do breathe. You put your feet on the floor. You make coffee. You take one step, then another, and before you know it, you've made it through an entire day. And then you do it again the next day, and the day after that, until eventually the days start to get a little easier." "Does it really get easier?" Madeline asked. "Or do you just get better at pretending?"
Noah considered lying, offering false comfort, but she deserved honesty. Both, I think. The wound never fully heals, but you learn to live around it. You find new reasons to keep going, new people to care about, new purposes that make the pain worth carrying. Something passed between them in that moment, an understanding that went deeper than words. They were both survivors of different traumas, both people who'd had their worlds shattered and were trying to figure out how to build something new from the pieces. And maybe, just maybe, they could help each other with that reconstruction. The next week passed in a blur of legal proceedings, depositions, and media attention that Noah found overwhelming. His cabin was still a crime scene, so he and Ethan remained in the Portland safe house, living out of suitcases and watching their quiet life become public property. Reporters camped outside, hoping for an interview with the ranger who'd rescued Madeline Cross. His phone rang constantly with requests from talk shows, book publishers, movie producers who wanted to turn his story into entertainment. He ignored them all. This wasn't entertainment. This was his life, his son's safety, a woman's near death that shouldn't be commodified for ratings or profit. Madeline faced even worse scrutiny. The media dissected every aspect of her life, from her childhood in Detroit to her rise in Silicon Valley to the conspiracy that had nearly killed her. Some reporters portrayed her as a hero, a strong woman who'd survived against impossible odds. Others questioned her judgment, asking why she hadn't seen the betrayal coming, implying that her trust in Vance was somehow a weakness. Noah watched her endure it all with a grace he couldn't have mustered, giving carefully worded statements through her lawyers while refusing to be drawn into the circus. But he could see the toll it was taking, the way her shoulders grew tighter with each news cycle, the way exhaustion etched itself deeper into her features. "You should rest," he told her one evening when he found her working on her laptop at midnight, probably the fourth night in a row she'd skipped sleep. "Your body's been through hell. It needs time to recover." "I can't rest," she said without looking up from the screen. "Every minute I'm not working is a minute Vance's lawyers are working, spinning narratives, trying to discredit my testimony. I need to stay ahead of them." "Madeline." Noah gently closed her laptop, ignoring her protest. "Marcus has this handled. You have an entire FBI division building the case against Vance. You don't have to carry this alone." "Don't I?" She looked at him, and he saw tears gathering in her eyes. "He tried to kill me, Noah. He had me beaten and buried alive. And now his lawyers are on television saying I'm mentally unstable, that I fabricated evidence, that I'm doing this for attention. And people are believing them. I've seen the online comments, the conspiracy theories, the people who think I staged my own disappearance for publicity. Those people are idiots," Noah said flatly. "And they don't matter. What matters is the truth. And the evidence supports your version of events completely. Vance is going to prison. His lawyers can spin all they want, but they can't change the facts." "Facts don't always win." Madeline wiped her eyes angrily, frustrated by her own tears. "Money wins. Power wins. Men like Richard Vance have been getting away with worse for centuries because they have the resources to make the truth irrelevant." She wasn't wrong, and Noah knew it. He'd seen it in the army, officers who committed war crimes but never faced consequences because they knew the right people, had the right connections. He'd seen it in civilian life too. Wealthy defendants who walked free while poor kids got decades for lesser crimes. The justice system worked, but it didn't work equally for everyone. "Then we make sure the facts are so overwhelming that money doesn't matter," Noah said. "We make sure every piece of evidence is documented, every witness statement is recorded, every connection is traced. We build a case so strong that even the best lawyers in the world can't break it down." "We?" Madeline asked, a hint of a smile touching her lips. "Since when is this your fight too?" "Since I pulled you out of that grave. Since I let you into my home and my life. Since I watched my son bond with you over terrible coffee and shared trauma." Noah paused, choosing his next words carefully. "You're not alone in this, Madeline. You have people who believe in you, who will fight for you. You just have to let us." She stared at him for a long moment, and Noah saw her defenses crack, saw vulnerability she usually kept hidden break through. "I don't know how to do that," she admitted. "I've spent so long being self-sufficient, relying only on myself, that I don't know how to accept help without feeling weak." "It's not weak to need people," Noah said. "It's human. And after everything you've survived, you're allowed to be human for a while. Something shifted in her expression, a decision being made. She reached out and took his hand, and the contact was electric, charged with meaning neither of them was quite ready to name. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for seeing me as a person instead of just a victim or a billionaire or a story, for treating me like I matter." "You do matter," Noah said, "more than you know." They sat like that for a moment, hands clasped, two damaged people finding unexpected comfort in each other's presence. Then Ethan appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from his eyes, and the spell broke. "Dad, is everything okay?" his son asked, looking between them with the sharp perception of a child who'd learned to read adult emotions by necessity. "Everything's fine," Noah assured him. "Just talking. Go back to bed." "Can I stay up for a while? I had a bad dream." Ethan's voice was small, younger than his 12 years, and Noah was reminded that his son was still just a kid despite everything he'd been through. "Come here." Noah opened his arms and Ethan crossed the room to settle beside him on the couch. "Want to talk about it?" "It was about Mom," Ethan said. "She was sick again, but this time you weren't there. It was just me, and I didn't know how to help her, and she kept getting worse and worse, and I couldn't—" His voice broke, and Noah pulled him closer. "It was just a dream," Noah said, even though they both knew it was more than that, a memory wrapped in nightmare clothing. "Your mom's at peace now. Nothing can hurt her anymore." "But things can still hurt you," Ethan said, looking up at his father. "Those men almost killed you. What if next time they do? What if I lose you the same way I lost Mom?" It was the fear they'd been dancing around for days, the terror that lived beneath Ethan's brave face. Noah met Madeline's eyes over his son's head and saw his own worry reflected back at him. They'd won the battle, stopped the immediate threat, but the war wasn't over. Richard Vance had resources, connections, people who might decide that witnesses were too dangerous to leave alive. "I'm not going anywhere," Noah promised his son, knowing it was a promise he might not be able to keep, but needing to say it anyway. "I'm careful, and I'm trained, and I have good people protecting us. Marcus and his team won't let anything happen to us." "You can't know that," Ethan said with the brutal honesty of youth. "Nobody can know that. Bad things happen to good people all the time. It happened to Mom. It almost happened to Ms. Cross. It could happen to you." Madeline shifted closer, placing a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Your dad's right about one thing. He has good people protecting him, including me. I'm not going to let anything happen to your father, Ethan. He saved my life. I owe him more than I could ever repay." "You don't owe me anything," Noah started to say, but Madeline cut him off. "I owe you everything, and I pay my debts. So if you're worried about your dad's safety, know that I'm going to use every resource I have to keep him protected. I'll hire the best security in the world if I have to. Nobody's going to hurt your family, not while I'm alive to prevent it." Ethan looked at her with something like hope dawning in his eyes. "You mean that?" "I never say things I don't mean," Madeline replied. "Your dad taught me that actions matter more than words, so I'm going to act. First thing tomorrow, I'm arranging for a security detail. Not just for me, but for both of you. Professional protection until we're absolutely certain the threat has passed." "Madeline, that's not necessary," Noah began, but she held up a hand. "It absolutely is necessary. Richard Vance is in custody, but he's not convicted yet. He has millions of dollars and powerful friends who might decide that eliminating key witnesses is worth the risk. I'm not taking any chances with your safety or Ethan's." Noah wanted to argue, wanted to insist they could take care of themselves, but looking at his son's face, he saw relief there, a lessening of the fear that had haunted Ethan since the attack, and he realized that his pride, his need to be self-sufficient, was less important than his son's peace of mind. "Okay," he said. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. This is what you do for people you care about. You keep them safe." Madeline's voice was firm, but Noah heard the emotion underneath. "The question is, what happens after? When the trial is over and the dust settles and you can go back to your normal life, what then?" It was a question Noah had been avoiding, but it was time to face it. His cabin would be repaired eventually, the crime scene tape would come down, and he could theoretically return to his life as a forest ranger. But would that life still fit? Could he go back to the quiet isolation that had sustained him for 3 years after everything that had happened? "I don't know,"
he admitted. A month ago, I would have said yes without hesitation. The forest was my refuge, my escape from everything that hurt. But now, he looked at Madeline, then at Ethan. Now I'm not sure isolation is what I need anymore. What do you need? Madeline asked softly. Purpose, I think. Something beyond just surviving day to day. I loved being a ranger, loved protecting the forest and helping lost hikers find their way home. But maybe there's more I could be doing, more ways I could make a difference. Madeline nodded slowly, understanding blooming across her face. I've been thinking the same thing. That foundation I mentioned, the one focused on protecting whistleblowers and exposing corruption, I'm serious about that. I want to build something that matters, something that turns my worst experience into something that helps others. She paused. And I was hoping you might want to be part of it. Noah blinked, surprised. Me? I'm a forest ranger, Madeline. I don't know anything about running a foundation or investigating corporate crime. No, but you know about protection, about keeping people safe when they're vulnerable, about standing up to threats even when the odds are against you. She leaned forward, intensity radiating from her. I need someone I can trust absolutely, someone who's proven they'll do the right thing even when it's dangerous. That's you, Noah. What exactly are you asking me to do? Be the Foundation's director of security. Help me build programs that protect people who are trying to expose wrongdoing. Teach them how to stay safe, how to recognize threats, how to survive when powerful people want them silenced. Madeline's eyes were bright with the vision taking shape. You'd be saving lives, Noah. Just like you saved mine. It was a lot to process, a future Noah hadn't imagined when he woke up that morning. He looked at Ethan, saw his son watching him with anticipation, and realized this was a decision that would affect both of them. What do you think? He asked his son. Should Dad take a job that means we might have to leave the forest? Ethan considered this seriously, his young face thoughtful. I think Mom would want you to do it, he said finally. She always said you were meant for more than hiding in the woods, that you had too much good in you to waste it on being sad. The words hit Noah like a punch to the chest. He'd forgotten that Emily had said things like that, had tried to convince him in those final months that her death shouldn't be the end of his purpose. He'd been too consumed by grief to hear her then, but maybe now, 3 years later, he was finally ready to listen. Then I'll do it, he said, looking at Madeline. On one condition. Ethan comes with me. Wherever this foundation is based, whatever work we end up doing, my son stays close. I'm not sacrificing our family for a job, even a meaningful one. I wouldn't ask you to, Madeline said. In fact, I was hoping you'd both come. Ethan's smart, he's brave, and he's got good instincts. When he's older, if he wants to be involved in the foundation's work, I'd be honored to have him. She smiled at the boy. But for now, he can just be a kid. Go to school, make friends, live a normal life in a place where people aren't trying to kill his dad. That sounds nice, Ethan admitted. I mean, I'll miss the forest, but maybe it's time for something different. So it was decided. Noah Briggs, former Army medic and forest ranger, would become the director of security for the Cross Foundation for Recovery and Resilience. It was a title he never would have imagined for himself, a future that felt both terrifying and right in equal measures. Over the next several weeks, as Richard Vance's trial date approached, Noah and Madeline worked together to lay the groundwork for the foundation. They found office space in Seattle, hired a small but dedicated staff, and began reaching out to whistleblowers who needed support. The work was challenging, often frustrating, but it gave Noah a sense of purpose he'd been missing since Emily's death. Ethan thrived in Seattle, enrolling in a good school and making friends for the first time in years. Noah watched his son come back to life, saw the light return to his eyes, and knew they'd made the right choice. The forest would always be there, would always be part of who they were, but it was time to stop hiding and start living again. Marcus Chen visited often, updating them on the case against Vance and coordinating security for the Foundation's higher-risk clients. He and Noah fell into an easy friendship, the kind that came from shared military service and mutual respect. They'd grab coffee and swap stories, Marcus talking about his years in the FBI, Noah sharing memories of Afghanistan and the quiet moments in Blackwood Forest that had sustained him through the grief. You know, Marcus said one afternoon as they watched Ethan play basketball in the park across from the Foundation's office,
You and Madeline make a good team. She's got the vision and the resources. You've got the tactical expertise and the moral compass. It's a powerful combination. We work well together, Noah admitted carefully, aware of the subtext beneath Marcus's words. Is that all it is? Just working well together? Marcus asked with a knowing smile. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like more than that. Noah didn't answer immediately, watching Madeline through the office window where she was deep in conversation with a potential client, her hands gesturing animatedly as she made her case. She changed in the months since the attack, become both harder and somehow more open, more willing to connect with people, to trust selectively but deeply. I don't know what it is, Noah said honestly. We've been through something intense together, survived something that would have destroyed most people. That creates a bond. But whether it's more than that, whether it could ever be more than that. He trailed off, uncertain how to articulate feelings he barely understood himself. Emily wouldn't want you to be alone forever, Marcus said gently. She'd want you to be happy. How do you know what Emily would want? The words came out sharper than Noah intended, defensive. Because I met her once, remember? When you were still in the service, before Afghanistan. You brought her to that unit reunion in Fort Lewis. Marcus's expression was kind. She pulled me aside that night, told me to keep an eye on you, to make sure you came home in one piece. And she told me that if anything ever happened to her, someone needed to remind you that you deserved to be loved. Noah felt his throat tighten with emotion. She said that? Word for word. Said you had a tendency to sacrifice yourself for others, to put everyone else's needs before your own, and someone needed to make sure you didn't forget you mattered too. Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. So I'm telling you now, you matter, Noah. Your happiness matters. And if Madeline makes you happy, if there's even a chance of something real between you, don't run from it just because you're afraid of betraying Emily's memory. The words settled over Noah like a benediction, permission he hadn't known he needed. He thought about Emily, about their life together, about the way she'd loved him fiercely and completely. She'd wanted him to be whole, to find joy, to live fully instead of just surviving. And maybe, just maybe, that meant opening himself to the possibility of loving someone again. But that was a question for another day. Right now there was work to be done, a foundation to build, people to protect. The rest would come in its own time, or it wouldn't, and either way, Noah would keep moving forward because that's what survivors did. The trial of Richard Vance began on a cold morning in late October, 6 months after Noah had pulled Madeline from her grave. The courtroom was packed with reporters, spectators, and Cross Technologies employees who'd come to see justice served. Noah sat in the gallery with Ethan on one side and Marcus on the other, watching as Madeline took the stand to testify. She was magnificent, calm, articulate, unflinching in her recounting of the attack and everything that followed. When Vance's lawyers tried to rattle her with aggressive cross-examination, she met them with steel wrapped in silk, never losing her composure, never backing down from the truth. Ms. Cross, the defense attorney said, his tone dripping with false sympathy, isn't it true that you'd been under tremendous stress in the months before your disappearance? That several colleagues had expressed concern about your mental state? My colleagues expressed concern because I was investigating financial irregularities in the company, Madeline replied evenly. Irregularities that, as we now know, were connected to Mr. Vance's embezzlement scheme. Their concern was actually an attempt to discredit me before I could expose the truth. But you have no proof that Mr. Vance was involved in any embezzlement, except for the $15 million in unauthorized wire transfers traced back to his personal accounts. The encrypted emails discussing the logistics of my murder. The testimony of 3 contractors who've all identified him as the man who hired them. Should I continue, or is that sufficient proof for you? The gallery erupted in whispers, and the judge gavelled for silence. Noah allowed himself a small smile. Madeline was going to be fine. Better than fine. She was going to win. The trial lasted 3 weeks, a parade of witnesses and evidence that painted a damning picture of Richard Vance's corruption. The contractors testified about being hired to eliminate Madeline. Forensic accountants walked the jury through the complex financial fraud. FBI agents detailed the conspiracy that had allowed Vance to operate with impunity for years. And when it was Noah's turn to testify, when he had to relive those terrifying hours in the forest, He spoke his truth clearly and simply. How he'd found Madeline buried alive. How she'd begged him not to call the police because she feared corruption. How he'd protected her and his son against armed attackers because it was the right thing to do. "Mr. Briggs," the prosecutor asked on direct examination, "what made you decide to risk your life for a woman you'd never met?" Noah thought about that question, about all the complex motivations that had driven his actions. But the answer, when it came, was simple. "Because she needed help," he said, "and I could provide it. That's all." The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours before returning with a verdict: guilty on all counts. Richard Vance, who'd built an empire on betrayal and blood, would spend the rest of his life in federal prison. When the verdict was read, Madeline sat perfectly still, not celebrating, not crying, just absorbing the validation of her truth. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed them, shouting questions, demanding statements. Madeline handled it with grace, thanking the prosecutors, the FBI, and most especially the ranger who saved my life and reminded me that there are still good people in this world. That night, back at the foundation office, after Ethan had gone to bed and the staff had all gone home, Noah and Madeline found themselves alone for the first time since the trial began. They stood by the windows overlooking the Seattle skyline, the city lights stretching out before them like possibilities made manifest. "It's really over," Madeline said quietly. "After all these months, all the fear and the fighting and the uncertainty, it's actually over." "How do you feel?" Noah asked. She considered the question seriously. Relieved, vindicated, but also empty somehow. "I've spent so long focused on bringing Richard to justice that I'm not sure what to do now that he's been convicted." "You build the foundation," Noah said. "You help other people who are going through what you went through. You turn your pain into purpose." "Is that what you did? After Emily died?" The question was gentle, careful. "I tried to. Mostly I just hid for 3 years and pretended I was healing." Noah turned to face her. "But you're giving me a second chance at that. A chance to actually do something meaningful with the pain instead of just carrying it around." Madeline met his eyes, and Noah saw something in her gaze that made his breath catch. "I couldn't have survived this without you," she said. "I need you to know that. Not just the physical rescue, though that too, but everything after. The support, the belief in me, the refusal to let me face this alone. You gave me back something I thought Richard had taken forever." "What's that?" "The ability to trust someone." She reached out, placed her hand over his heart. "Thank you, Noah Briggs, for saving my life in every way a person can be saved." They stood like that for a long moment, the space between them charged with unspoken feelings, possibilities neither was quite ready to voice. Then Madeline stepped back, the moment passing but not forgotten. "We should get some rest," she said. "Tomorrow starts the next chapter." "Yeah," Noah agreed, even though sleep was the furthest thing from his mind. Tomorrow. But as he lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, Noah couldn't stop thinking about the way Madeline had looked at him, the warmth in her voice, the gentle touch of her hand over his heart. And he wondered if maybe, just maybe, the next chapter they were starting wasn't just about the foundation. Maybe it was about something more. Something neither of them had been looking for but both desperately needed. A chance to be whole again, to love and be loved, to prove that survival was just the beginning, not the end. The future stretched out before them, uncertain but full of promise. And for the first time since Emily's death, Noah Briggs felt ready to meet it. 6 months after Richard Vance's conviction, the Cross Foundation for Recovery and Resilience had helped 43 whistleblowers, expose 2 major corporate fraud schemes, and become a model for how resources and compassion could combine to protect the vulnerable. Noah found himself doing work he'd never imagined, coordinating security details, training people to recognize threats, building networks of safe houses and trusted contacts across the country. It was exhausting and fulfilling in equal measure, the kind of purpose Emily had always told him he was meant for. But it was the quiet moments that surprised him most. The Saturday mornings when he and Madeline would arrive at the office early, working side by side in companionable silence, coffee cooling beside their laptops as they reviewed cases. The evenings when she'd join him and Ethan for dinner, the 3 of them falling into a rhythm that felt dangerously close to family. The way she remembered that Ethan loved pepperoni pizza but hated mushrooms, the way she'd ruffle his hair when he made her laugh, the way she'd look at Noah sometimes with an expression he was afraid to interpret. "Dad, are you ever going to ask her out?" Ethan said one morning, his directness cutting through Noah's careful avoidance of the subject. They were making breakfast together, a weekend ritual they'd maintained even with all the changes in their lives. "Ask who out?" Noah deflected, focusing intently on scrambling eggs. "Ms. Cross, Madeline, you know exactly who I mean." Ethan rolled his eyes with the exasperation only a teenager could muster. He'd turned 13 2 months ago, growing taller and more perceptive with each passing day. "You like her. She likes you. Everyone can see it except apparently you two." "It's complicated, Ethan. She's my boss, technically, and we've been through a traumatic experience together. Sometimes feelings that develop in extreme situations don't translate to real life." "That sounds like something you read in a book," Ethan said. "Real life is what's happening right now, and right now you're happier than you've been since Mom died. Madeline's a big part of that. So what's really stopping you?" Noah set down the spatula, turning to face his son. "I loved your mother very much. She was my whole world for a long time. And even though she's gone, starting something with someone else feels like I'm leaving her behind. Like I'm saying she didn't matter enough." "Mom mattered," Ethan said firmly. "But she's dead, Dad, and I don't think she'd want you to be alone forever just because you're afraid of being happy again. That's not love, that's just being scared." The wisdom in those words, coming from a 13-year-old boy, nearly broke Noah's heart. "When did you get so smart?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "I had good parents," Ethan replied simply. "Both of them taught me that love isn't something you hoard or protect. It's something you share, even when it's scary, even when you might get hurt. Mom loved you enough to want you to be happy. I think it would make her sad to see you holding back like this." Before Noah could respond, his phone buzzed with a message from Madeline asking if he and Ethan wanted to join her for a hike in the Cascades. She'd discovered a love of the outdoors since moving to Seattle, often asking Noah to show her the trails he'd grown to know in the months since they'd left Blackwood Forest. "See?" Ethan said, reading the message over his father's shoulder. "She's asking you on a date and doesn't even know it. You should tell her you'll go, but that I have plans with friends, so it'll just be the two of you." "You're diabolical," Noah said, but he was smiling. "I'm helpful," Ethan corrected. "There's a difference." So Noah found himself that afternoon driving into the mountains with Madeline beside him, the Seattle skyline shrinking in the rear-view mirror as they climbed toward wilderness. She'd dressed for the occasion in hiking boots and cargo pants, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, and Noah was struck by how different she looked from the polished tech executive who'd dominated boardrooms and negotiated billion-dollar deals. This version of Madeline was softer somehow, more at peace. "I've been thinking about expanding the foundation," she said as they drove. "Opening satellite offices in other major cities, building a national network of protection for whistleblowers. What do you think?" "I think it's ambitious," Noah replied. "But so was starting the foundation in the first place. And we made that work. If anyone can pull off something this big, it's you." "Not just me, us." She turned to look at him. "I couldn't do any of this without you, Noah. You know that, right? You're not just an employee or a colleague. You're my partner in every way that matters." The word hung in the air between them, loaded with meanings neither had fully acknowledged. Partner. It was true in a professional sense, but Noah wondered if Madeline meant something more, if she felt the same pull he'd been fighting for months. They reached the trailhead and started hiking, the path winding through old-growth forest that reminded Noah of Blackwood, of the morning that had changed everything. The trees here were different species. The air carried the salt tang of the Pacific rather than the pine-sharp scent of his former home, but the essential character was the same. Peace. Permanence. The sense that the forest had been here long before humans arrived and would remain long after they were gone. "I come out here sometimes when I need to think," Madeline said as they walked. "It helps me remember what's real, what matters. The office can be overwhelming, all those people depending on us, all those stories of corruption and suffering. But out here, everything's simple. Trees grow, rivers flow, life continues regardless of human drama." "That's why I became a ranger," Noah said. After Afghanistan, after seeing what people were capable of doing to each other, I needed to be somewhere where the rules made sense, where cause and effect were straightforward. Plant a seed, a tree grows. Take care of the forest, it takes care of you. Is that what you were doing? Taking care of the forest? Or hiding from the world? The question was gentle but direct, and Noah appreciated her refusal to let him off easy. Both, probably. After Emily died, I told myself I was healing, processing, taking time to grieve, but really I was just avoiding having to live in a world that didn't include her. They walked in silence for a while, the trail climbing steadily until they reached a clearing with a view of Mount Rainier dominating the southern horizon. Madeline stopped, taking in the sight with undisguised awe. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "I've lived in San Francisco for 15 years and never once took time to appreciate the natural world. Too busy building my company, making money, chasing success. Richard used to joke that I'd probably work through the apocalypse if it didn't interfere with our quarterly earnings." "Do you miss it?" Noah asked. "The company, the power, the life you had before?" "Sometimes," she admitted. "I miss the simplicity of it, the clear metrics of success. Revenue, market share, stock price. You always knew where you stood, but I don't miss the person I was becoming." Madeline Cross, tech CEO, was starting to lose sight of Madeline Cross, human being, the woman who grew up poor and scared and determined to make a difference. Somewhere along the way, making money became more important than making a difference. And now? Now I remember why I started coding in the first place. Not to get rich, but to solve problems, to protect people, to build things that mattered. The foundation lets me do that in a way cross technologies never did. She turned to face him, and Noah saw vulnerability in her eyes that she usually kept hidden. "But I couldn't have found my way back to that person without you. You reminded me what courage looks like, what integrity looks like. You showed me that some things are worth risking everything to protect." "You did the same for me," Noah said. "You gave me a reason to stop hiding, to start living again, to believe that purpose could exist after loss." They stood there in the clearing, the mountain watching over them, and Noah felt the moment crystallizing into something significant, something that would define everything that came after. This was the precipice. He could step back, maintain the careful distance they'd preserved for months, keep their relationship safely professional. Or he could step forward into uncertainty, into the possibility of connection that terrified and thrilled him in equal measure. "Madeline," he started, then stopped, unsure how to articulate what he was feeling. "I know," she said softly. "I feel it too. This thing between us that we keep pretending isn't there." "I don't want to pretend anymore," Noah admitted. "But I also don't want to rush into something and risk what we've built. The foundation matters. Our friendship matters. If we try to be more and it doesn't work, we could lose everything." "We could also gain everything," Madeline countered. "Noah, I've spent 6 months watching you be an incredible father, a dedicated professional, and the most genuinely good person I've ever met. I've seen you put everyone else's needs before your own, sacrifice your own happiness to keep your son safe and the foundation running. And I've fallen in love with you somewhere along the way." The words hit Noah like a physical force, stealing his breath. "Madeline, let me finish," she said. "I know you loved Emily. I know you still love her in some ways, and I would never ask you to stop. But love isn't a finite resource, Noah. You have room in your heart for more than one person, and I'm asking you to make room for me. Not to replace Emily, but to stand beside her memory as someone who loves you for who you are right now, scars and all." Noah felt tears burning in his eyes, emotion overwhelming him. "I'm scared," he admitted. "Scared of betraying Emily's memory, scared of losing you if this doesn't work, scared of being happy because every time I've been happy, life has found a way to destroy it." "I'm scared too," Madeline said. "Terrified, actually. The last person I trusted completely tried to bury me alive. My capacity for trust has been shattered in ways I'm still trying to repair. But I trust you, Noah. I trust you with my life, with my heart, with everything that matters to me. So I'm asking you to trust me back, to take this leap with me and see where we land." Noah thought about Emily, about the promises they'd made, about the life they'd planned that cancer had stolen. But he also thought about what Marcus had said. about Emily pulling him aside at that reunion and telling him to make sure Noah remembered he deserved to be loved. She'd known, even then, that he had a tendency to sacrifice himself, to put everyone else first, to forget that his happiness mattered too. And Ethan was right. Mom would want him to be happy. She'd want him to live fully, love deeply, risk everything for the chance at connection. That was who Emily had been, someone who'd embraced life despite its fragility, who'd loved without reservation even knowing it might end. "Okay," Noah said, the word coming out rough and uncertain but honest. "Okay, let's do this. Let's see what happens when we stop pretending." Madeline's smile was brilliant, transforming her face into something radiant. "Yeah?" "Yeah." Noah reached out, took her hand, marveling at how natural it felt. "I can't promise it'll be easy. I'm kind of a mess, emotionally speaking. And I come with a 13-year-old son who will probably give you a hard time just to make sure you're serious." "Ethan's amazing," Madeline said. "And I like that you're a mess. Perfect people are boring. I want someone real, someone who survived the unsurvivable and kept their humanity intact. That's you, Noah." They started walking again, hands linked, and something fundamental had shifted between them. The careful distance was gone, replaced by a tentative intimacy that felt both terrifying and right. Noah kept expecting guilt to crash over him, the sense that he was betraying Emily by moving forward, but it didn't come. Instead, he felt something like peace, the sense that he was finally allowing himself to live again instead of just existing. They talked as they hiked, about everything and nothing. Madeline told him about her childhood in Detroit, about learning to code in the public library because they couldn't afford a computer at home, about the scholarship that had saved her life by giving her a path out of poverty. Noah shared memories of Emily, stories he'd locked away for years because they hurt too much to revisit, finding that in the telling they became celebrations rather than wounds. "She sounds wonderful," Madeline said when he finished a story about Emily pranking him on their first anniversary by filling their apartment with balloons. "I wish I could have met her." "She would have liked you," Noah said, surprising himself by meaning it. "Emily respected strength, and you're one of the strongest people I've ever met. Not just physically surviving what Richard did to you, but emotionally surviving it, choosing to build something positive instead of letting it break you." "Some days I'm not sure I have survived it," Madeline admitted. "Some days I wake up and I'm back in that box, dirt pressing down on me, convinced I'm going to die alone in the dark. The panic attacks are less frequent now, but they still come, usually at night, usually when I'm alone." "You don't have to be alone anymore," Noah said. "Not if you don't want to be." The trail looped back toward the parking area, the afternoon sun slanting through the trees in golden shafts. They walked slowly, reluctant to end this moment, this transition from what they'd been to what they might become. When they reached Noah's truck, Madeline hesitated before getting in. "Can we tell Ethan?" she asked. "About us, I mean. Or do you want to wait, make sure this is real before we involve him?" "It's real," Noah said with certainty. "And Ethan already knows. Has known for months, apparently. He's the one who told me to stop being an idiot and ask you out." Madeline laughed, the sound bright and genuine. "Smart kid." "Too smart for his own good sometimes." Noah opened her door, an old-fashioned gesture that made her smile. "But yeah, he's pretty amazing. Takes after his mother that way." They drove back to Seattle as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Noah called Ethan to let him know they were bringing dinner home, and he could hear his son's grin through the phone line when he mentioned that Madeline would be staying to eat with them. "Finally," Ethan said. "I was starting to think you'd never figure it out." That evening, the three of them sat around Noah's kitchen table eating takeout Thai food and talking like the family they were becoming. Ethan regaled them with stories from school, some environmental project he was working on that involved studying watershed pollution. Madeline listened with genuine interest, asking questions, offering suggestions, treating his teenage concerns with the same seriousness she'd give to a corporate crisis. "You know," Ethan said during a lull in the conversation, "I'm glad Dad found you. I mean, I'm sorry about the whole buried alive thing and the attempted murder and everything. But I'm glad it led to this, to you being part of our lives." "I'm glad too," Madeline said, and Noah heard emotion thick in her voice. "You've both given me something I thought I'd lost forever, a reason to trust people again. a sense of belonging somewhere. You belong here, Ethan said simply. With us. For as long as you want. Later, after Ethan had gone to bed and Noah was walking Madeline to her car, she turned to him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Your son is remarkable, she said. The way he's processed his grief, the way he's opened his heart to letting someone new in. You've done an incredible job raising him. Emily and I both raised him, Noah corrected. She's still part of who he is, who we both are. She always will be. I know. And I love that about you, about both of you, that you honor her memory instead of trying to erase it. Madeline reached up, touched Noah's face gently. I'm not here to replace anyone. I'm here to add to what's already beautiful. Noah kissed her then, finally allowing himself what he'd wanted for months. It was soft and tentative, a question more than a statement, and when she kissed him back, he felt something inside himself unlock, some frozen part of his heart thawing after 3 years of winter. Good night, Noah, she said when they finally pulled apart. Good night, Madeline. He watched her drive away, then stood in his driveway for a long moment, looking up at the stars beginning to emerge in the darkening sky. Somewhere up there, he liked to imagine Emily was watching, smiling at his fumbling attempts to move forward, proud that he was finally allowing himself to be happy again. The next few months passed in a blur of growth and change. The foundation expanded, opening offices in New York and Los Angeles, helping more people than Noah had thought possible. He and Madeline navigated their new relationship carefully, balancing professional responsibilities with personal connection, learning each other's rhythms and boundaries. There were difficult moments, times when Noah's grief would resurface unexpectedly or Madeline's trauma would manifest in panic attacks that left her shaking. But they worked through it together, supporting each other the way only people who'd survived the unsurvivable could. Ethan flourished, his initial wariness about his father dating someone new evolving into genuine affection for Madeline. She attended his basketball games, helped with homework, remembered his birthday with a gift so thoughtful it made him cry. And slowly, carefully, they became a family unit that honored Emily's memory while making room for new love. One Saturday morning, almost a year after Noah had pulled Madeline from her grave, they drove back to Blackwood Forest. Noah's cabin had been repaired, the bullet holes patched, the blood cleaned away, and the Park Service was asking if he wanted to return to his position as ranger. It was a question that had been weighing on him for months, a choice between the life he'd known and the life he was building. They parked at the old trailhead and walked in silence to the clearing where it had all begun. The forest had reclaimed the disturbed earth, wildflowers growing where Madeline's makeshift grave had been. Noah stood at the spot, remembering that morning, the desperate sounds from beneath the soil, the moment when he'd made a choice that had changed everything. I think about it sometimes, Madeline said quietly. How close I came to dying here. How if you and Ethan had taken a different trail, or gotten up an hour later, or made any of 1,000 different choices, I'd still be buried here. My bones would be part of this forest now. But you didn't die, Noah said. You survived. We both did. We did more than survive. We lived. We built something beautiful out of something horrible. She turned to face him, and Noah saw tears on her cheeks. This place is part of our story, Noah. The beginning of everything we've become. I used to hate it, used to have nightmares about the trees and the dirt and the darkness. But standing here now, I realize it gave me the greatest gift I've ever received. What's that? You, Ethan. A second chance at life, at love, at purpose. Richard thought he was burying me, ending my story. But really he was just clearing away everything false, everything that didn't matter, so I could see what did. Family, connection. Using my resources to actually help people instead of just accumulating more wealth. She took Noah's hand. I wouldn't change what happened, not if it meant losing what we have now. Noah understood what she meant, felt the same complicated gratitude for a trauma that had paradoxically saved them both. So what do you think? Should we tell the Park Service I'm coming back? Is that what you want? He looked around at the forest that had been his refuge, his hiding place, his home. I love this place, he said, but I love what we're building more. The foundation, our relationship, the family we're creating. I can't do both. Can't be a ranger living in isolation and a director of security building a national network. I have to choose. Then choose, Madeline said. Choose Choose what makes you happy, what gives you purpose. Whatever you decide, I'm with you. Noah thought about Emily, about the promises they'd made to each other. But he also thought about the conversation Marcus had relayed about Emily telling him to make sure Noah remembered his happiness mattered. She'd known, even before the cancer took her, that he would need permission to move forward, to choose life over grief. I choose us, he said. I choose the foundation in Seattle and a future I can't fully imagine yet. I choose life over memory, love over loss. I choose to keep building instead of hiding. Madeline's smile was radiant. Then that's what we'll do, together. They walked back to the truck hand in hand, leaving the clearing and its ghosts behind. Noah felt something lifting from his shoulders, a weight he'd been carrying for so long he'd forgotten it was there. This wasn't abandoning Emily or betraying her memory. This was honoring what she'd wanted for him all along, the life she'd begged him to live even as her own was ending. On the drive back to Seattle, Madeline talked about her plans for the foundation, the new initiatives she wanted to launch, the lives they could change with the right resources and the right team. Noah listened, contributing ideas, feeling the excitement of building something meaningful. This was his purpose now, not protecting an empty forest from imaginary threats, but protecting real people from real dangers. There's something I want to ask you, Madeline said as they reached the city limits. Her tone was serious, almost nervous, and Noah felt his pulse quicken. Okay. Ethan's birthday is coming up. He's turning 14, which feels significant, and I was thinking, I'd like to be there. Not just as your girlfriend or colleague, but as someone who's part of his family. Someone who has a right to celebrate his milestones. She paused, choosing her words carefully. I'm not trying to replace Emily. I could never do that, would never want to. But I'd like to find my place in your family. To be someone Ethan can count on, trust, maybe even love someday. He already loves you, Noah said. He told me last week that having you around makes the house feel complete again, that it's nice to have someone who cares about both of us, who makes me smile the way I used to smile before Mom died. Madeline's eyes filled with tears. He said that? Word for word. My son has a gift for cutting through complicated emotions and finding the simple truth underneath. The simple truth is that you're family now, Madeline. You have been for a while. We just hadn't put words to it yet. Then I have another question, and you can say no if it's too much too soon. She took a deep breath. Move in with me. Not right away, not until you and Ethan are ready, but eventually. I bought a house in Magnolia, 4 bedrooms, big backyard, room for all of us. I keep rattling around in it alone, and I think about how nice it would be to wake up to you and Ethan every morning, to have dinner together every night, to be a real family instead of just visiting each other's lives. Noah's first instinct was to say it was too fast, too much, that they needed more time. But then he thought about what Ethan had said months ago, about how Mom wouldn't want them to be alone forever, about how love was something you shared even when it was scary. And he realized he was tired of being scared, tired of holding back, tired of protecting himself from potential hurt. Okay, he said. Let's do it. Let's be a family. Madeline's laugh was joyful, almost disbelieving. Really? You're sure? I'm sure. Life's too short and too fragile to waste time on fear. Emily taught me that, even if it took me 3 years to remember the lesson. He reached over, took her hand. Let's build something beautiful together. Let's show Ethan what it looks like when people choose love even after loss. Let's be brave. They told Ethan that evening over dinner, explaining the plan to eventually move into Madeline's house, to become a blended family in all the ways that mattered. Noah watched his son's face carefully, looking for signs of resistance or resentment, but saw only relief and happiness. Finally, Ethan said, echoing his response from months earlier. I was starting to think you two would dance around this forever. When can we move? Can I paint my room? Does the house have a basketball hoop? We'll go see it this weekend, Madeline promised. And yes, you can paint your room whatever color you want. Within reason, no neon green. What about neon blue? We'll negotiate. They fell into easy banter, planning the logistics of combining their lives, and Noah felt a contentment he hadn't experienced since before Emily got sick. This was what healing looked like, he realized. Not forgetting the past or erasing the pain, but building something new alongside it, making room for both grief and joy to coexist. Later that night, after Ethan had gone to bed, Noah pulled out the box of Emily's things he'd kept in his closet. Photos, letters, small mementos of their life together. He'd been unable to look at them for years, the memories too painful to revisit. But now, with Madeline sitting beside him, he found he could open the box without breaking down. "Tell me about her," Madeline said softly. "Not the sanitized version, but the real Emily. What made her laugh? What drove her crazy? Who was she when no one was watching?" So Noah told her about Emily's terrible singing voice and her insistence on karaoke anyway, about how she'd cry at commercials but stay dry-eyed through actual sad movies, about her habit of leaving coffee cups everywhere and her inability to follow a recipe without improvising, about the way she'd loved fiercely, completely, without reservation or restraint. "She sounds wonderful," Madeline said when he finished, "and I'm honored that you trust me enough to share her memory like this. It means everything to me that you're not trying to erase her or pretend she didn't exist." "She existed," Noah said. "She was real and important and irreplaceable. But she's gone. And I'm still here. And I think she'd want me to keep living, to keep loving, to remember her not with grief but with gratitude for the time we had." He closed the box gently. "You're not competing with her memory, Madeline. You're standing beside it, part of the story of who I'm becoming after loss." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, and Noah felt the pieces of his life settling into a new pattern. Emily would always be part of him, a foundational piece of who he was. But there was room now for Madeline too, for the future they were building, for the family they were becoming. The year turned, seasons changing, life moving forward with relentless momentum. They moved into Madeline's house in Magnolia, blending their possessions and their lives into something that felt both strange and right. Ethan painted his room a compromise shade of blue, not quite neon, but definitely bold, and filled it with posters and books and all the detritus of teenage life. Noah set up his office in what had been a spare bedroom, arranging his files and equipment with military precision, and Madeline transformed the master bedroom into a space that reflected both of them, mixing her modern aesthetic with his preference for warm, lived-in comfort. They navigated the challenges of becoming a blended family with patience and humor. There were disagreements about household rules, about parenting styles, about how much independence a 14-year-old should have. But they talked through each conflict, compromising, adjusting, learning each other's boundaries and triggers. It wasn't always easy, but it was real, and that authenticity felt more valuable than perfection. The foundation continued to grow, its reach expanding as word spread about the work they were doing. Noah found himself traveling more, training security personnel, consulting on high-risk cases, using his military experience to keep vulnerable people safe. It was demanding work, sometimes dangerous, but it gave him a sense of purpose he'd been missing since leaving the army. One evening, about 18 months after Noah had pulled Madeline from her grave, they gathered for dinner at the Magnolia House. It was Ethan's 15th birthday, and Marcus Chen had joined them to celebrate, bringing stories from his latest investigation and a basketball signed by Ethan's favorite player. They ate and laughed and told stories, the conversation flowing easily the way it did among people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. "You know," Marcus said during a lull in the conversation, "I've been thinking about the night I showed up in Blackwood Forest, about how close we came to a completely different outcome. If I'd been 30 minutes later, if those contractors had been slightly better trained, if Noah had been slightly less stubborn about protecting you two." He shook his head. The margins were so thin, life pivoted on such small choices. "That's always true, though," Madeline said thoughtfully. "Every moment contains infinite possible futures, and we're constantly choosing which one becomes real. Richard chose betrayal. Noah chose protection. I chose to trust a stranger instead of giving up and dying in that grave. And those choices led us here, to this table, to this family." "Do you ever regret it?" Ethan asked suddenly. "Not the family part, but everything you went through to get here. The attack, the burial, all the trauma. Was it worth it?" Madeline considered the question seriously, giving it the weight it deserved. "If someone had told me a year before it happened what was coming, told me I'd be beaten and buried alive by someone I trusted, I would have done anything to prevent it. The trauma was real and terrible, and something I still carry every day. But if they'd also told me what came after, that surviving it would lead me to Noah and Ethan, to the foundation and the lives we've saved, to a sense of purpose deeper than anything I'd known before. She paused. I think I still would have chosen to go through it. Does that make sense? It makes perfect sense, Noah said. Some of the most important things in life come wrapped in pain. We don't get to choose the package, only what we do with what's inside. They raised their glasses in a toast to survival, to choices, to the beautiful complexity of lives rebuilt after destruction. And Noah felt Emily's presence like a benediction, not sad or jealous, but proud, grateful that he'd finally learned the lesson she'd tried to teach him in her final months, that love wasn't finite or exclusive, that opening your heart to someone new didn't diminish what you'd felt before, that surviving meant more than just breathing. It meant living fully, loving completely, choosing hope over despair even when hope seemed impossible. After dinner, after Marcus had left and Ethan had retreated to his room with his new basketball, Noah and Madeline stood on the deck overlooking the sound. The water was dark and restless, city lights reflecting off its surface in shimmering patterns. Noah pulled Madeline close, wrapping his arms around her, feeling her settle against him with the ease of long familiarity. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For being buried in my forest, for asking me to help you instead of pushing me away, for giving me a reason to stop hiding and start living again, for loving my son like he's your own, for being patient while I figured out how to love you back." He kissed the top of her head. "For reminding me that survival is just the beginning, not the end." "You did the same for me," Madeline said. "You showed me what real courage looks like, what genuine goodness looks like. You gave me back my faith in people when I'd lost it completely. And you built a family with me, created something beautiful out of shared trauma." She turned in his arms to face him. "We saved each other, Noah. That's what partners do." "Partners," Noah repeated, liking the word, the commitment it implied. "I like the sound of that." "Good, because I have no intention of letting you go. You're stuck with me, Noah Briggs, for as long as you'll have me." "How does forever sound?" "Like a good start," Madeline said, and kissed him. They stood there on the deck as night deepened, two people who'd been through hell and come out the other side not just intact but transformed. Noah thought about the ranger he'd been, hiding in the forest, nursing his grief like a wound he didn't want to heal. That man seemed like a stranger now, someone he'd been in another lifetime. This version of Noah Briggs was stronger, fuller, more complete. He'd learned that love didn't end with death, that purpose could be found after loss, that some graves were meant to be escaped from. In his pocket, his phone buzzed with a message from one of their foundation clients, someone they'd helped escape a dangerous situation. The message was simple, just 2 words, but they carried the weight of a life saved, a future preserved. "Thank you." Noah showed the message to Madeline, and she smiled, that brilliant expression that still had the power to steal his breath. This was why they did it, why they'd built the foundation, why they worked 18-hour days and took risks and poured their resources into protecting people most of the world ignored. Because everyone deserved the chance to escape their grave, to survive the unsurvivable, to find love and purpose on the other side of trauma. "We should get some rest," Madeline said eventually. "Tomorrow's going to be busy. New client intake in the morning, staff meeting in the afternoon, that interview with the Times about the foundation's expansion." "The glamorous life of non-profit directors," Noah said with a smile. "Emily would have laughed at me, you know. She always said I was meant for more than just walking through trees and writing incident reports." "She was right," Madeline said. "But so were you. The forest taught you patience, taught you to see the beauty in small things, taught you that healing takes time and can't be rushed. You needed those years in Blackwood to become the person who could do this work, who could build this life with me." They went inside, moving through their evening routine with the practiced ease of long cohabitation. Noah checked on Ethan, finding his son asleep with a book open on his chest and the basketball Marcus had given him clutched in one hand. He removed the book carefully, turned off the light, and stood in the doorway for a moment watching his son breathe, marveling at the resilience of youth, the capacity to survive loss and keep growing. In their bedroom, Madeline was already under the covers, reading something on her tablet. She looked up as Noah entered, and the expression on her face was soft, content. Exactly the expression he'd seen on Emily's face 1,000 times in the years before cancer stole her away. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "About how far we've come," Noah said, climbing into bed beside her. "About the morning I found you buried in the forest, and how impossible this would have seemed then. About how sometimes the worst thing that ever happens to you leads directly to the best thing that ever happens to you." "Life's funny that way," Madeline agreed. "Richard thought he was ending my story when he buried me. Instead, he just gave me the chance to write a better one. One where I'm not alone, not isolated by wealth and power, but connected to people who matter. To you, to Ethan, to everyone we helped through the foundation. That's worth more than all the money I ever made." She set aside her tablet and turned off the light, and they lay in the darkness holding each other. Two survivors who'd found their way home through trauma and trust, and the simple choice to keep trying. Outside, the city hummed with its usual nighttime energy, millions of lives intersecting and diverging in patterns too complex to map. But here, in this room, in this bed, everything was simple. Noah drifted toward sleep thinking about Emily, about the promise he'd made at her grave to keep living, to keep loving, to honor her memory by refusing to let grief consume him. It had taken 3 years, a buried billionaire, and a desperate fight in the darkness, but he'd finally kept that promise. He was living. He was loving. He was whole again in ways he'd thought impossible. And somewhere, he liked to imagine Emily was smiling, proud that he'd finally found his way out of the forest and into the light. Proud that he'd saved someone who desperately needed saving. Proud that he'd allowed himself to be saved in return. The last thought Noah had before sleep claimed him was gratitude. Gratitude for the sun sleeping down the hall. Gratitude for the woman in his arms. Gratitude for the work that gave his life meaning. Gratitude for a second chance at happiness when he'd thought all his chances were used up. And gratitude, strangely enough, for that September morning when he'd heard a voice calling from beneath the earth, when he'd made the choice to dig instead of walk away, when he'd pulled Madeline Cross from her grave and in doing so had climbed out of his own. Some rescues saved more than one person. Some graves contained not endings but beginnings. Some whispers in the darkness changed everything that came after. Noah Briggs had learned these truths the hard way, through pain and loss and desperate courage. But he'd learned them. And in learning them, he'd found a life worth living, a love worth keeping, a purpose worth fighting for. That was enough. More than enough. It was everything.